There we are.
Hello.
It's always a bonus. The random button mashing, sometimes it does actually work. Yeah, I'm gonna slide some windows around on this end and do this and that. Pop that way. Oh, there we go. Alright. Yeah.
Someday. Yeah.
Yeah. The previous film was released only yesterday? Oh, wow. Brent, we've got a no audio from Solari. Solari yeah. You're not doing it right if you don't have a problem.
Moment. Device. Let us. Oh, there it is. Pulling up the properties makes it work. But then when I close the properties, it dies. Now it's back. Okay, that's weird. So basically, as long as I had the properties window open, the microphone worked. Really? That is exceedingly odd.
And
I
by
like
the way,
Solari's comment. What kind of haunted tech do you have over there? That's
Pretty
awesome.
much, yes. Yes.
This is what happens when you buy discount tech in the cursed items bin.
Exactly, yes. What was I hearing? Oh yeah, there's a nutritionist who was talking about um, food safety and saying, here's a tip: if you're in the grocery store and they're selling like dented cans, just pass it up. Just
Yeah.
don't. I
yeah.
don't care how cheap it is. Just not worth it. Botulism is
Well,
not
unless you're
fun.
buying it for I was gonna say unless you're buying it for somebody you don't like.
Right.
Hey, you want some slightly dented tuna from 2 years ago? Huh?
Exactly.
It's fine.
By the way, your dog keeps going on my lawn. Eat up.
All right, let's see if we can get this going then. All right, welcome everyone. We are talking about Pompoko, an anime film by Isa Takahata from 1994, which was his follow-up to Only Yesterday, a film about how wonderful the 60s were in Japan, following it up to say how bad the 60s were in Japan, at least for native creatures. And Pompoko is just really interesting. Takahata is a very thoughtful director in the sense that he is very familiar with animation. He uses animation very deliberately. And this is absolutely a film, I think, that does that. Now, obviously, this is a film about environmentalism. I think if you missed that, stop scrolling through TikTok. Come on. So this is a clear environmental film. But I kind of want to start by asking, what are some of the other themes in this movie that leapt out to you guys besides just environmentalism and conservationism?
Well, for me, it's on the obviously first flush where you see the village area and the Tanuki sort of running around the village area is also speaking back to the nostalgic aspect of the loss of rural Japan.
Yeah.
The very, very potent sense of things have really, really changed. You have construction equipment, you have building of high rises, you have clearing of the land, you have, and one very, good point that they make of that is like removing a mountain, removing a good portion of a mountain to build modern housing and modern districts areas. And what you see when you start off is a quaint, beautifully rendered, very soft, very pleasing to the eye, rural Japanese village, non-industrialized, just lovely.
Very much like the village in My Neighbor Totoro.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
thematically, these things carry on, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, for me, as I was watching it, and this is the first time I watched Pompoko in any form. So watching this and listening to that, the starting is in the 1960s Japan, and they talk about the raising of the landscape and that. And to me, for the entire movie, part of it was there were actually a lot of different things going on in my head as I was watching this. One of the big things was change. It's a big idea of change and the future and the pushing back of the past and making way for the future, but still trying to find the way for the past to live in the now, if that makes sense. By that point, what I mean is, as you're talking about taking down entire mountains, there's great scenes in this movie where they talk about taking down shrines and taking down old farmhouses. Like in the very beginning of the movie, they're all happy in this little farmhouse, abandoned farmhouse that they found, and they're just like, hey, this life is great. And then suddenly and it's just all torn down by this big machinery. And the change is hard on everybody. Obviously, it's change, and it goes hard on those who just aren't expecting it, who aren't looking forward to the future. And when I say looking forward, I mean like having the long view, which is unusual for the Japanese in general. But for the Tanuki, when you realize that they're just fun-loving people and they just kind of like live in the moment, they kind of don't think about what's going on in the future, so they don't prepare that well. They prepare for what they need, and you see that as a thing that goes through the movie. You don't see them thinking, oh, we might actually have to change ourselves in order to adapt to this new environment, and they're just completely, hopelessly incapable of doing it. A more minor theme that I got out of this was corruption. 60s corruption on terms of the Japanese, and you see it creep in a little bit with the Tanuki about halfway through the movie. So for the 1960s Japan, they're coming out of an era of great corruption. World War II, end of World War II in the 40s, Americans basically set up the occupation. The Yakuza are very active during this time period because they're the black market people. They're the people who are just like, why are you waiting in line for your milk? We have it right here. We bought it off the shipment. We're going to charge you a little extra, but here you go. You need medicine? Okay, we're going to charge you a little extra. Here you go. But there's that corruption. And it started legitimizing, and there's a great movie by Akira Kurosawa called The Bad Sleep Well. And it's about Hamlet. It's actually a spin-off of Hamlet. But it's about is that it takes construction companies, Japanese construction companies, because they were the primary economic drivers in the late 50s and early 60s. And they did all sorts of messed up corruption stuff, like bribery, murders, and things like that to push these projects forward because it's money in a country that has been devastated by war. So by the 60s, you see that, and then you notice how they talk about during the movie, like the narrator comes out and goes, and the Tama Hills Project were illegally dumping dirt on the other side of the mountain,
neighboring mountain,
affecting the other Tanuki communities.
Yeah.
So there's that corruption, and it leaks into the Tanuki community when there's that scene where Gonta is finally healed, right? He wants to go to war with the humans, right? And everyone just goes, Tokichi, he's got the right idea. Let's stick with this guy. And what does he do? He brings in his goons and he pulls out like a toy pop gun. Something.
Yeah.
And he aims it, and he says, "I'm taking over," and that's very a corrupt thing to do. Everyone's looking at him like, "Going, the hell are you doing?" And then, but fortunately, the scene resolves itself in a very, very amusing manner where they're talking about tempura. John Tucker goes, and then he turns, he says, looks at the leader, goes, "I'm sorry."
It just sits down.
It's done. But so there was that corruption element to it, and which I thought was interesting. But I think that the stronger one is basically just not. The thing that made me sad about this entire movie was their inability to change themselves enough. Even though they could transform and change it physically, they couldn't change themselves for the most part to match what was going on, and that's why they kept losing battle after battle after battle after battle. If you want to call them battles, or every.
Well, they did destroy a lot of equipment, but it affected no real
and
change.
They killed people.
That shocked the hell out of me. That was like the news report talked of death. I was thinking, oh, this is going to be fairly nice, and people maybe get a broken arm, but they'll be okay. It's like,
I'm watching the scene, and the trucks are like going into these ravines. I'm like going, I can understand how they went to a bush and the guy comes up, what's going on? But no, they just like disappear into this thing, and then there's one scene where the truck actually starts flipping, and I'm like going,
and this is one of the reasons I love Takahata, because that is clearly him through animation, telegraphing something, right? You don't spend 3 weeks animating a truck, falling off a cliff and crashing without implying this is serious violence, right?
Yeah.
And so
this isn't just fun.
And absolutely that is the thing. And I think to your guys' point, I think modernity is a really strong theme as well. Just this contrast between the past and the present, and just the general theme of not just finding ways of living with the present, but like, what is modernity? Like, how do we actually behave? There's a great line at the end where the main character says something along the lines of, I have great respect for humans because it is so exhausting to live this way. And it really brought home the fact that, it's not a contrast between simply two different ways of living. It is a contrast between a very easy way of living and a much harder way of living for the Tanuki.
I'm not gonna lie. If I had a choice between staying crunched up between someone else on a subway or being able to be on a golf course at night and eating my fill of food, which way do you think I'm gonna jump?
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Well, it's just very interesting from them foraging and the really, again, like Mutual of Omaha Tanuki wildlife, where they're fighting over a mouse, and they're foraging for food in the wild.
Mhm.
And then you see them having to resort to their transformation to go down to buy food, and then the understanding that they need money, that they can't just, and the exchange where Madam Red, I don't remember what her character's name is, but they one of the Tanukis tries to pay her in cash, and she hits him on the head, and the cash turns into leaves.
Yeah,
It's
that was
like,
awesome.
this is they're becoming more and more aware of the fact that they're losing their habitat, they're losing their traditional hunting abilities, and now there's no choice to obtain sustenance without this strange paper thing, and you can't make it up. You need to get it.
The English delivery of that line was just perfect. When I told you to go out and make money, I didn't mean literally.
Literally.
Trust McNeil.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and that is one of the interesting things, is this whole idea of and one of the reasons I find that topic, like you brought up, JJ, of that, was that the human world and the Tanuki world are consistently portrayed very differently.
Yeah.
Every time you cut to the humans doing something, it is concrete shooting out of a tube. It is, machines digging into the land. It is very different. There are no tree huggers here, right? There's nothing other than very modern human beings wearing modern clothes. And I think that is, it's one of the reasons why the film is, as we were talking about before, not subtle in its primary message, but also in a way, and it's one of the reasons I think that Takahata has power. Like Grave of the Fireflies is not very subtle either.
No.
It has complexity, but his message is very clear. I think Pompoko is very, Pompoko's kind of directing its message. The main character turns to look you in the eye at the end.
Yeah.
And deliver that. But it is in setting up those deliberate contrasts, setting up those things to say, here are these two things. Let's look at those two things and ask ourselves what's right and what's wrong, and what we should do about these things.
I really enjoyed beyond the overarching message of it. I enjoyed that aspect of the Mutual of Omaha thing, where it was like, you got to see when the Tanuki were being Tanuki, you got to see them in this beautifully rendered environment that was just, it made me want to take a walk on a fall day through the woods.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
But it also struck me with that not just environmental message, but the Tanuki, they move into an old house because the old house is there.
Yep.
The Tanuki gather at the shrine because the shrine is there. When you see human beings, you don't see them existing in the extant. You see them destroying the extant, and they're not creating something as equally wonderful.
Right.
They're transformative without being redemptive in any of the creation that they do.
You look at the shrine, how they replace the shrine with this sort of, abstract statue and some water, and it's like, okay, that's nice, but it's not a shrine.
No.
Well, to your point, JJ, one of the things I found oddly on spot, was the construction scenes, and having lived in where I lived in Montgomery County during the 80s and 90s, it was constant subdivisions, left, right, front, center. And so those, like, I was watching those construction scenes and like how they did things and what was set up first and what was set up last, and just how ugly it was. And it was just the point of just like, it's just brown dirt. And then going back to what you guys are saying, which is, here's this, even though it's dilapidated, it's kind of a beautiful dilapidated barn. It's in the middle of the Nebraska woods, and it's in this middle of things, and they can just ease into that and they can transition into that, whereas the humans come in and they're just like, that's a beautiful tree, knock it down.
Mm-hmm.
A public restroom right here, so here we go, let's do this.
Yeah.
And like the scenes where they're pouring in the concrete seems like such a, at first glance you're just like, okay, they're pouring concrete, but again, right, as you say, he's not going to make that animation for the sake of making that movement. There's a point behind that. Here's some ugly looking sludge going into a hole to make a thing that's very bland, and they're going to call it, oh, this is the causeway for the river that we're going to move because we want the river to go this way instead of that way. And it's just the ugliness of it, the ugliness of a construction site. And then of course,
that picture of the concrete river channel
Yes,
is just it is so beautifully starkly rendered.
Yeah,
where it's like,
It's
oh
just like
wow, that's
it's just-
I
it's
got
like-
you here.
it's just like, can I go back to the dilapidated farmhouse? I kind of like the appeal of that a little bit better.
And then they'll call it the Piney Forest Condominium.
Yeah. It's in
And there's
honor
no
of the
Piney
piney
Forest.
forest that used to be here. Like, thanks. Appreciate that.
I just
I
thought
also
that
thought that tearing down of shrines and stuff is just sort of an interesting modern approach to clearing the way of
yes.
those things that tied people to the land and gave them that sort of appreciation of the things around them, and all the Jesus statues that show up at one point when the landowner is walking through. It's like, I didn't remember there being so many statues around here. It's like, there is something disheartening and soul-wrenching about pulling the land that bears the respect for support of people and animals apart to pave it and to build all these structures that are not, hand-hewn logs and thatched roofs, that are not, done with care and reverence and integration to the property, stuff that's sharply square and sharply modern and sharply not very attractive.
The scene where they tear down the shrine and take that down, what it reminded me of, for those of you who live in Maryland, what I'm going to talk about, the ICC, Erin County Connector, which in Maryland was a project that was put on hold for 40 years, and it was bought.
Wow.
To make that interconnector in Montgomery County to go from one side of the county to the other to make it easier. What happened was that it created these causeways where actually they allowed nature to run wild. So that a lot of deer population, a lot of these animal populations came up. And when it came time, when Governor Ehrlich back in the early 2000s said, okay, we're going to move the project forward after 40 years of saying, no, we're not. A lot of things got torn down. And, of course, obviously we're talking about the ecological impact and, impact on animal habitats. But to the shrine conversation, there was my father was a real estate appraiser, and we did a church. And the reason why we had to do church was because the ICC took up their parking lot as part of eminent domain. And they said, well, if you do that, you actually cut us off from everything. There's no way for anybody. The way the plan was created is that there was no way for anybody to get to the church. Like literally, there was no way to drive to the church. And it was also cutting off a neighborhood. But for the church, the county said, and the state said, okay, well, here's some money at you. We're going to come in with our bulldozers and we're going to knock out the woods behind you and just lay gravel down. There's your parking lot. And they're just like, well, wait a minute. There's land here and this is a forest. And, if you're going to do this, there's compensation that has to be had. So, even though it wasn't as spiritual as that shrine being torn down, there's, that land development by the owner of a religious institution saying, hey, this is a place of worship. Let's treat it with a little bit better respect. It also goes along the lines of many people who lived along the causeway where the ICC was built had family plots. And that caused a lot of problems because you can't build a highway on a graveyard without moving.
Yeah, you got to move everybody
in there. And so then the people who are there are just like, but we don't want to move. don't want to move our son that we buried in our backyard because this is where he wanted to be buried, and we got the. Some of them didn't do it legally, but some of them did, and it was just a tough thing. But it's just that respect of the land, of what that land means
Right.
to you, the spirituality of that land. And when I saw the scene with how easily they knocked down the shrine and just only 4 people standing there going, okay, we're done, walk away. And that kind of speaks to how, like, sometimes there's that disrespect. As the other scene where one of the Tanuki disguises himself as an actual fox, or as a kitsune,
Yeah, to go on top of the
and to scare people. But did you notice that shrine was larger and nicer than the one they tore down?
Yep.
And so there's a message there too, which is a little bit of corruption.
Well, Brent and I were talking a little bit about this earlier too. Is one of the voices for, hey, Tanuki, you guys got to get your act together, and you have to learn to find a way to deal with the human beings. And the way that happens is the mayor's assistant guy with the real scrawny face. He's a fox.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I'm not saying that as in, oh, he's a fox. No, I'm saying that as he's literally a spirit fox. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's like the old shrine gets knocked down. The fox shrine does not, because the foxes have found a way into the system to manipulate it. So undoubtedly, the message for that is influence inside, as you're talking about, Steve, about corruption elements. Obviously, the foxes have an agenda that they're working with. So the fox shrine survives undoubtedly because the ear of the mayor is with a fox who is making sure that shrine survives. Like, interesting.
Well, and it's that contrast between the stereotypical clever, forward-thinking fox. There are stories of foxes who deceive people over the course of decades, and have these very long cons running. With the Tanuki being much more living in the moment, it's again, it gets back to that question of they're kind of not capable of thinking that far in the future. We have to find a way of integrating. The best they'll do, as we see, is wait until they have no choice, and then just find an odd job. And it's one of the other interesting things you see at the end. The jobs that they have are not managing banks, right? They're very just, I found a job.
Yeah, run of the mill. I mean, even the people that they transform into are run of the mill. The foxes are they're very good-looking, stylish people. They're really in there, and the Tanuki are your average Joes.
Well, that's actually kind of part of the title of the whole movie, which is Pompoko, which is actually what the Tanuki would do is they talk about playing their stomach as drums. Well, the myth is that what the Tanuki would do is that to trick humans, and talking about long con versus haha, isn't this funny, and an immediate solution, was to get a meddlesome human, and they would do this to get the human to go, where is that coming from? And then in addition to playing their stomachs, it's called Tanuki Bayashi, I think it's called. And they do that, and maybe another one would play a flute or something and lead the human away from wherever it is the Tanuki don't want them to be. And then at the end of it, the music disappears, and the human's just like, wait, where'd the music go? And then the human stops and looks around and goes, wait a minute.
Where am I?
So literally, and that's what that was the Tanuki solution was. Well, we're going to make the humans so lost they can't get back. So that way, that's how we get rid of them. Obviously, it doesn't work. Whereas the Kitsune, the fox guys are just like, as you pointed out, the long con. They're just like they're able to figure out how to get in and just live,
manipulate humanity.
Right?
Yeah. And what's so fascinating about that is how when you see the foxes, or the fox in this case, very much setting up, okay, here's your solution. Here's what you should do. You just integrate into human society. He is doing that with, a certain kind of adult entertainment, very much implied. It's literally selling your body. It is literally making a sacrifice so that you can survive.
Right.
And it is also very manipulative. kind of
Yeah.
a thing as well.
But did you see how weirdly hungry the female foxes were when he brings out the chicken?
Yeah.
He's feeding them, and they're all just like food,
Yeah.
And the Tanuki is just like, yeah, so what? I'll take food. Eat it all the time. So what's your deal? But it was kind of weird seeing that how like they're all being so manipulated to do whatever they want them to do. The leaders of the fox leaders, I guess, in the one particular foxes, and that they're willing even to do that to their own people, which makes it easier to understand why he goes to what's the one the shape changer that comes from the other island, the one that looks like Wilford Brimley. Him. He's it's easier for him to say, okay, this is what you do. The guys who can transform, you're going to get jobs in this park. You're going to have money. You're going to have this. See this chicken? It's yours. And he goes, well, what about the rest of them? And the fox just casually, very casually, I might add, sorry.
Yeah.
We had to do it too. So, we're going to have to
let those that can't will come along.
Yeah. And I will also point out that, and it's almost lost, there is also a point at the end of that where he says, and also they might find a niche, right? Like they might find a way of surviving. You never know. And you can tell he's throwing them a bone. But it's again one of those things that I appreciate about, Ghibli and Takahata and so forth, is that they're always willing to present a reasonable perspective on things. And saying, here's an option, and it's not genocide. Right? It's not like, it's not something horrible.
I'll take the non-genocide option.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, is that's what Gonta is doing. Gonta is like, we have to kill all the humans. Like that is literally his perspective.
Now, here's a thing that occurs to me in talking about, that little bit where they could find the niche. England has urban foxes.
Oh, yeah.
They have a sizable and noticeable fox presence in English towns and villages. I don't know off the top of my head. I wonder if Tanuki have found that same kind of sort of niche, whether they scavenge and nest in urban settings, much like foxes would do, or raccoons or possums or things like we have. Because I would imagine if it's similar size to a large raccoon or a fox, then there is a likely chance that they could survive in an urban environment. It ain't going to be pleasant. It's not going to be like living in the fields, but
they usually live in your chimney. That's where raccoons go in the urban areas. Like we as a kid, we used to clear them out of our chimneys all the time.
Wow.
We had a fox den on our property in Gettysburg, and but they weren't the beautiful foxes that you're referring to. They're more gray matted, a little bit more wild, and have the most horrifying sound howl.
The scream,
It sounds like a small child being murdered on the road.
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine that at like 1 a.m. and you hear that and it's like it's like 30 feet away and you're just like, please just not be a child, be the fox.
Please don't be a banshee. Please don't be a banshee.
Well, what's also interesting, and this is where I'd like to get your guys' perspective, is on the historical allegory in Pompoko, because this is something I was not able to, like, I could tell. So, that first battle is obviously a samurai battle, right, and is very much playing off of that. And you can see Takahata, like the sequence where they, where you see, I forget the name of the guy, and the married woman and the 3 kids, all sort of tumbling out of that shrine. That is I think a direct visual reference to a Akira Kurosawa film. So
Rashomon or anything like that?
No, I think it's from Dreams. Which is one of his more modern set films. But
is it Dreams or is it Ikokoro?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
I think it's Dreams.
Yeah.
It's been a while since
same here. But I looked up on Wikipedia and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that scene. Anyway, so it's one of those things where obviously he's sort of playing around with samurai film, with dramatic. In fact, that whole sequence with them is very much Kurosawa film of, oh, please don't go. Oh no, I have a duty to my people and all.
Yeah, very
Bird
beautiful.
flies over, like, clearly. But there's, I did not was not able to directly connect a lot of these scenes with any specific point in history.
Well, like, think about the scene where they send off the two Tanuki to go to the neighboring to find the elders.
Yeah.
Right.
They put on the monk's straw hat, and they have capes. They don't just they're Tanuki.
Right.
They literally can just scamper off on four legs and go do their thing. But they are literally presented as almost like wandering monks.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Where they've got their stuff on and they turn back and they're like, "We're leaving," and it's just like, with the sea in the background at one point, I'm like, I know that scene too, but I cannot for the life of me figure out where I've seen it.
That scene is so where with the samurai on the water or the warrior monk on the water. It's just like so iconic as samurai movies. They're everywhere, but they're great scenes. They're amazing scenes. And you're right, when you see that, you're just like, okay, you can turn into a raccoon dog and just run, But they're just like, but they're just like, it's like this. It's like the movie where they turn around and go, "I'll try to come back."
I mean, because honestly, think about it. It's a really dangerous journey. They've made that clear. They might never return. I would guess if a human being saw a little tumbly little Tanuki with a little hat on and a little cape, you're damn straight they're not going to return, because somebody's going to be like, "Oh, what's that?" Versus a Tanuki running on all fours, they're going to just be like, "Oh, look, it's a Tanuki," and they're going to ignore it. So yeah, by walking around like a little furry person, of course you're going to be in danger. Like, what's the logic of that? So another one of those things where the scene is so specifically done that it's like, it just drives you mad as to what that came from. Was it wholly created from from another movie, another source, and this is your homage, or what is it?
Totally, yeah.
So when you were talking about historical aspects, John and I were talking right before we all came on, and John, you had a really good point about saying how at the first battle was the Warring States period, and that kind of thing. And you and I were just like trying to figure out what specific battles that they were. And my guess is because of you made the point, John, that the final battle is where the samurai lose, which is Gunta, and that in real life was the second battle. I think the second real battle of the Satsuma Rebellion, where the last samurai, which is who did I say it was? Saigo Takamori.
Sorry,
Saigo. Interestingly enough, you could do a historical how not to do it with the last samurai with Tom Cruise in it. But the actual real life Saigo Takamori, he early on, that it's the two opposing factions, the blue and the red. They fight, and that's the first battle, and that's the Warring States period, because they're talking about all the different raccoon communities. The second battle, which we were trying to figure out, I think, to me, is part of the conflict in real life Japan between the Satsuma, who was a very prominent force in the Japanese Empire, and of course as a leader, the last samurai, Saigo Takamori, and the Chosen. The Chosen were an equally powerful family, and they were both vying for control of the imperial court in Japan right before the Meiji Restoration. When the Tanuki become unified, right? So in real life, the Chosen and the Satsuma did come together, but there was always distrust between them. They did come together, and Gunta becomes the war leader, basically. And that's what Saigo did. He became the war leader, and he promoted the cause of unity for the Japanese people. So Gunta is doing the same thing, but then once everything falls apart, and Gunta keeps insisting that we fight and we kill and we destroy, and that's what Saigo Takamori did in real life, and he winds up going up against everybody and winds up alone in that last battle that you're referring to. And
The Battle of
what was it?
Shirayama in September of
Shirayama.
1877.
Okay.
It's in
Wow.
Hokkaido. In Hokkaido.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the last battle where he literally, Saigo Takamori and like maybe a couple hundred samurai led one final charge, and they all died. They never found Saigo Takamori's head, by the way. And Gunta, if you notice, the last thing he does with his small group of Tanuki that are still with him, still fighting, they throw a big head.
Yep.
They're just doing
Wow.
one last thing and going down the hill and
Mhm.
bashing and smashing as much as they can before they're taken out.
Mhm.
So I think, John,
Yeah.
I think you hit it on the head with the last battle there. I think
That's
that's
fascinating.
yeah.
And that's a really interesting kind of twist where, Saigo, and if you want to read this much into it, Saigo is for the Japanese people against the foreigners, basically.
Right.
Whereas Gunta is for the Tanuki against the Japanese.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right.
So there's an interesting kind of self-reflection on that, I guess. And it's also hard. And again, and we were talking about this before. Takahata made this when he was he was around 60, and so when you get up to that age, you get nostalgic. You get to a point where you're looking back on your life and you're looking back to how things were in the past, and it's very natural to look back and say, I think we took a wrong turn somewhere, and I think there's just something that we lost. This is somebody who lived through that. Like, he lived through the 60s.
Yeah.
He experienced that.
Yeah.
So he would know.
Well, it's always fun. Not that the environmental and Tanuki's getting killed. That's not the fun part. It's always fun from Western perspective to watch these things and to have the little sort of bells and lights go on to recognize that not only do you have this intentional history of the Japanese wrapped into things so that things are displayed and shown as a literal, Gonta with his group, how this mates the last battle, the samurai. But it's also interesting to see the casual way that those bits of history come in, because those, that's exactly any given school class. They've gone through and had this hammered into them for all their exams, for to advance from middle school to high school to college. They just know all this stuff. So a lot,
Right.
a lot of this stuff, you can get beyond some of the intentional points of it to they already know all these stories, so that some parts of it kind of filter into these different places. And for us, it's like you have to kind of pick through it to find those things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I talk about this all the time when folks go back to try to watch stuff about the Meiji Restoration or about Oda Nobunaga, back in the day. I'm like, this is like having stories about Stonewall Jackson and
Right.
and those characters, where if I tell you Ulysses S. Grant, you know who that is, even if vaguely. A Japanese person has no idea what that means, right? And so there's all of this context that you heard about, and okay, this person's on that side, that person's on that side, and we just don't have that context. It's actually one of the things I wanted to bring up is I originally watched. So originally I watched a version of Pompoko that I acquired. So it was Japanese
version.
Well, a copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking like they did a live action or something. Like,
That'd be cool, though.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
Yeah, that would have been really kind of kooky.
And then I rewatched this version. And so obviously that was Japanese dub. I went back and I watched this version originally with the English dub. And I did not remember this much narration. And I really appreciated how much narration there was in this by the inimitable Maurice LaMarche. Brain from Pinky the Brain, narrating Pompoko, and explaining this is what happened in the 60s. This is all this stuff, and kind of giving that context.
I loved how what he did with saying in the year 33 of the Pompoko era, and just made it attached it to like as if you were human and going, oh, this is an era of
right
history. In the Pompoko era, you had that And
Interesting.
yeah, and it was and you needed that context. You're right, because when I tried the version that you gave me, it was all Japanese with no subtitles. I was trying to figure out what the heck to do. I of course didn't know what was being said, but I could tell right away that there was more explanation. I was getting more from an
See, it's
English version.
interesting because the one I watched didn't have any of like really great explanation of anything. It was just a straight on, translation subtitle kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I think I would have liked to have seen the one that you guys have Maurice LaMarche doing it.
And granted, I went back and checked, and like there is narration. Just to be clear,
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting that they invented all this narration out of whole cloth, but it definitely looked like they went in and they and there is even stuff about like the 60s in there, but they clearly went in and said, okay, let's provide a little bit more context for the English audience who just had
that would have been interesting.
Yeah,
that would have been more interesting.
And I'm glad that you said that, because now that makes it more sense, because the English dub was done far later after the movie was done. And for those of you who watch the English sub, if you look up the cast list, it's a list of, hey, it's that guy. Clancy Brown does the voice of Gunta. Remember that kid from Home Improvement?
Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
You have J.K. Simmons is in there. He does Sizemon.
Okay.
Is Richard Simmons in there too?
No.
So the two guys who
that would have been interesting.
The two drunk guys who are talking at the stand while the Night Parade of 1,000 is going behind them.
Exactly. Parade of 1,000 on.
That is the Brain from Pinky and the Brain, and Bender from Futurama.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Oh, wow!
Awesome. That is awesome. Wow.
I feel I missed something by not having seen that. I feel I missed something.
Oh my gosh! Oh, and Brian Posehn is in this. If you guys know who Brian Posehn is, he's a 6'3", geeky-looking guy who's very into heavy metal. He's a comedian. And if you heard his voice, it's a very distinct voice. But look up Brian Posehn on IMDb. You'll know exactly who he is. But the narration of go back to what you were saying, Brent. The narration was told in a very fairy tale style, very narrative style, and it's as if it was talking to a child.
Yeah. Because
of course, we all know this is spoiled territory. He is the grown-up voice of what's his name, Shokichi. Shokichi.
Yes.
And so he's the grown-up voice of that of that Tanuki. And so, but when he talks it, when he goes through it, he does a little of explanation. So those of you who haven't seen the English dub, he actually talks about it. He goes, and in Japan, when they did this construction, and he actually goes into a little bit of what's going on, and you get a little bit more context. And he describes Tanuki culture, which is in a very humorous fashion.
It's a fascinating thing, is that it's one of the reasons that Maurice LaMarche is so amazing, is because he takes this role where he's again narrating this thing, and he has this playful formalism to it, where he's saying it. He's saying, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to go. And that was a bad choice. And then he moves on, and there's just little moments where he just throws that in there. And it's just really, really fun. Because
matter-of-factly.
Right. And because he knows how to play around with that narration to make a point.
Now in the opposite direction, what I also got, for those of you who enjoy Highlander, Clancy Brown plays Kurgan in the Highlander movie, the original Highlander movie. So he's the bad guy.
Right.
And
what
so
does he play in this?
He's Gunta.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's okay.
So Clancy Brown's Gunta, and the scene where they're causing all the accidents, and he uses his pouch to cover up the window, like fierce look on his face.
Yeah.
I really expected him to start screaming out, "There can be only one!" And Queen starts in with Princes of the Universe, and it just goes.
Yeah.
And then I was telling Brent last night, I said, "No, I had to stop and go, no, come on, this is Pompoko. I'm later."
There's a little too
AMV.
much license there to
Yeah.
throw in Highlander in there.
I think we make the AMV of that happen, though. We should do that at some point.
Yeah, that would be kind of funny.
But yeah, it was also interesting from an animation perspective. So actually, getting back to that, I think it's really so. There are a couple of different animation things around so Ghibli gets a lot of money behind it, and I think it's that one of the things that they do early on in that film, because any advertisement for Pompoko is going to be about Tanuki, right? You're going to expect it to have a certain amount of goofiness and serious and lightheartedness. And I think those opening scenes are very much there to establish we are serious animators treating this seriously, because animating creatures like Tanuki is hard. Animating animals is hard, and especially, Tanuki that are I don't want to say not common animals, but they're not common subjects for animation. So you don't have a lot of reference of that. And so having those first few minutes of, no, we're going to show you what actual Tanuki look like running around and all that kind of stuff, was them, in a sense, flexing their muscles to say, this is going to have weight to it, which I really appreciated. Then there's some other interesting moments. Did you notice that sequence in the library where the camera is panning across all the stacks of books? That was CGI. All those stacks of books were CGI.
Really?
Oh yeah, quite.
In 1994.
In 1994. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm like, well
That's
done.
good, because I didn't even pick that up.
Yeah, because it's very smooth. It's very and you can see like how they're tracking the 2D behind it. And it's just the art style of it is a little different for the CGI versus the rest, and it's a great example of this is Takahata saying, he loves animation as a medium. Why would you pay somebody to spend 3 years drawing those stacks going by? That is absolutely something a computer can do, and it looks good because it's all of these very simple geometric objects. So I think it was a very clever thing to do, especially at that time. But I also just want to point out, this is one of the few Studio Ghibli movies that has an actual panty flash in it.
I'm trying to recall where that
Where?
is.
So
it's not Okyo. Is it Okyo when she and Shokichi are sort of by the tree talking to each other?
No, it is when they are doing the no faces to the cop.
Yeah,
And she jumps on the bicycle. And when she jumps on the bicycle, there's a panty flash. And I pointed out because people have this idea of Ghibli being this very serious, studio that would never do that. And it's like, no, it's right there. Like there are 2 or 3 frames where it's very clearly they're doing that for you. Just right there in the film.
I didn't even notice. I mean, that's the interesting part. It's like whatever, the entirety of the scene going on. It's like that's sort of the least important thing to pay attention to.
Speaking of which, I read on Wikipedia, but I was not able to see it. Apparently, other Ghibli characters show up in the night parade. I didn't see them either. That was the thing. Apparently, like Kiki is flying on a broom somewhere in the background. There's
good night.
Like
yeah,
that.
I mean, the way that they're showing a lot of them, it's just you're so distracted with what's going on. You'd have to go back and do like stop it, look around, stop again, look around.
Yeah. I tried to see, but I couldn't tell. And I also appreciate that they have the skeleton from that one painting, that one famous thing going off. It's like,
the giant skeleton, like that thing's creepy as hell.
No kidding.
That's a famous print.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, what is that? It's and isn't it some yokai?
Oh yeah.
Is? Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. That's actually another interesting thing. Is that what they transform into are basically all yokai in that sequence.
Well, that's the 1,000 yokai parade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which there was a series more than a few years ago. It was Nerarian, I think it was. Nerarian, which dealt with some kid who was going to inherit
Oh
all these
yes,
yokai experience,
yeah.
and he was supposed to lead the 1,000 yokai parade.
Right.
Mhm.
It was actually a decent series.
Yeah.
I love that whole sequence. I love that whole
oh.
sequence in the movie of them just going through and just whatever it was that if I was an animator and I was told
That's the thing.
that's what I would have imagined right there, and just
Well,
being able
here's the giant skeleton.
Mm.
Gasha Dokuro, also known as Odokuro, literally a giant skeleton spirit, 15 times taller than the average person, created from the amassed bones of people who died of starvation or in battle without being buried.
Dark.
Well,
Wow,
isn't that
that's
just
interesting.
particularly
Yeah.
with the Tanuki having difficulty feeding themselves, and the Tanuki fighting the battle where the last battle where they die,
and
they,
they're all
what
heaped
do
in
we
a pile.
Right, and what do we see at one point in there where Tanuki are looking off an embankment, and you see road workers picking up a Tanuki and throwing it in the back of a dump truck.
Yeah.
So there you go, Gasha Dokuro.
Oh my! When you look at Google Images, you literally see like the original print, and then like 3 over, it's the actual thing from Pompoko. So it's like,
there we go.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Is that the Takayasha the witch and the skeleton specter? Soma no Furudari? I think that's what, at least in Wikipedia, it says. Whatever. But yes, go ahead.
That sequence is just a pure celebration of animation. I mean, it almost feels like we chose this movie. We tried to make this movie so that we could spend 3 months animating all these transformation sequences, because that is animation right there. It is evolution. It is change. It is life, giving life to all of these things. It is it's amazing. And also, it should be pointed out, like you've also got all those shots of all of those humans, and so you got to design all those characters. Like, that's a lot of work to represent all of the bystanders and all their reactions. That was a very complicated sequence, and just very impressive. But yeah, no, totally. Cool. Is there anything else we wanted to cover? It's been going for about an hour.
So I've been trying to figure out whether or not it is a not direct, but an actual close English translation of the nursery rhymes that they sing during the movie.
Okay.
To the actual Japanese.
So I looked that up. Apparently, there are two interesting things about that. They said, a lot of them are either the same, or they rewrote them to more closely match what they wanted to say in the movie. So just rewrote the lyrics. But also, they said a lot of these songs are kind of like London Bridge is Falling Down. They're kind of nonsense lyrics that have just been passed on for generation to generation. So like even modern Japanese people wouldn't know what they mean. Like, they don't have a deep lyrical meaning to modern Japanese people, which made me feel a lot better. Because it's like, okay, yeah, it's just words basically. And we just know that they're oh yeah.
Get trapped in your head. I was humming some of those things for a while after I watched the movie. I was just like, okay, no, stop, please.
It's funny. I was crying when Gonta and his group got smashed by the car. I didn't, or the truck. I wasn't humming anything. I was kind of going, oh.
Well, and especially after they got back up after the battle, and you're like, it was all symbolism. Oh, I gotcha. Like, it was all no, they're actually gonna,
yeah. Just like, same sort of thing when you're driving down the road and you see a little critter that didn't make it across the road. You're just kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole end of the movie is the fate of the ones that can't transform.
Yeah. The ones who can't adapt.
They can't adapt. But it was interesting that the fox was right in that he said that some of them might figure it out, figure a way out, and be able to do it. And then there's I found the moment where the one Tanuki turns to the screen and looks at you and says, hey, we're able to do this, but there are things in your world that can't do this. So when you do these things, you're killing them. And then he turns around and he goes, party time. And but as he was saying that, as he was doing that, looking at the camera, breaking the fourth wall, I was just like, I'm a little creeped out. It was a little creepy. I was just like, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. It wasn't me.
And again, it's one of the things that I think Takahata is willing to do. Is he's willing to say, look, it's all cartoons, right? Like I can break the fourth wall if I want to. Like it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's all artifice. But it does end up being. It's the weird thing about Pampoko is, for how on the nose it is, it doesn't become Fern Gully, right? It still has impact. It still really feels. You do agree by the end of it. We're like,
right.
Yeah, like you have not pushed me away from this at all. I totally feel bad about myself for living in a modern society and not helping the little critters cross the road.
Well, I mean, and I think that's in great measure the point of having the character turn and break the fourth wall is it sort of sticks it on you. What's going on now is sort of stuck to you. It's not just you're the great, omniscient observing eye, and there's things happening. It's addressing you. Oh, stop looking at me.
It's kind of like, hey, buddy, what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it now? And you're just kind of like, can I just watch the cartoon?
And as I was saying, to Brent about the stylistic shift from realistic Tanuki to the little pot-belly gummy bear Tanuki to the way over stylized kind of goofy cartoony kind of things.
Yeah.
I understand, again, like somebody who's 60 years old calling back to something they enjoyed in their childhood, but I still stylistically I could have lived with realistic and gummy bear version. The third really flat 2D kind of thing. I didn't find that a necessity to enjoy the sort of mirthful Tanuki play about,
I hear that.
But then I didn't make it, so it's not my call.
Sure, yeah. No, it's fair. Matt brings up Watership Down in the chat, and I think it's a really interesting comparison. I think absolutely there are similar themes. Obviously not similar like stylistic stuff. They don't transform or anything. But it is very much this look at this. What I think is interesting about Watership Down, in contrast, is that Richard Adams kind of creates a culture for rabbits, creates words for them, whole language. Right. Whereas this film is much more. No, this is all Tanuki folklore. This is all the stuff that we know that Tanuki, so to speak, do. And it's one of the reasons I think that Pampoko has some of that power, because it's fantastical, but it's like folklore fantastical. It's all of the things that you're familiar with about Tanuki, as opposed to creating kind of an allegory, if you will.
Right. Well, I mean, Tanuki bear such a weight of their existence in Japanese mythology and lore that, you don't really have to do a lot. It's already been there by centuries worth of work. And again, from a Western perspective, the things we have to glean out of it are just, accepted fact. You know what I mean? Like people have grown up with these sort of like nursery rhyme kind of things. It's like you grow up with it. You don't necessarily think Ring Around the Rosie, pocket full of posies. That doesn't, equate to the Black Death. So that for all the Tanuki kind of stuff, they already have a deep, rich cultural element to them that you can glean out of what you need to do for the story.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot about Pampoko that it gets across everything it needs to get across to an international audience that did not grow up with Tanuki.
Right.
Like, you don't need to know any of that, and you will still absolutely be strongly affected by that, which I think is impressive. Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much for that. That was fascinating. I very much appreciate your guys' perspectives, and obviously the historical perspective. That's very cool. Let us take a quick break, and then we will come back and do some news, because it has been a week of things that have happened.
Good things. Please be good things.
Generally good things, I think. If I'm looking at the news correctly, but yeah, we'll come back.
We're getting
around...
seasons 2, 3, 4, or 5 of the greatest animes ever made.
Yay! Absolutely. So we'll be back around 9:15 for some news. See you all in a moment. life-size pushing cat bus. Yeah. Slightly less than full size. think. Yeah, I think it's large enough for adults to like climb onto, maybe, but not so much. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Just wanted to say hello to everyone off the trivia. Good to see everyone tonight. Matt, I see you in the chat room. Haven't seen you around for a while. Good to see you, Matt and man. How's everyone been? What's been new in your lives? Oh, and I can go ahead and switch off the spoiler stuff because we're not in the spoiler mode anymore. Because we're done talking about Pompoko for now. We will see. But meanwhile, let me switch back over. Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey again.
How has your week been?
Humid and sweaty.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds about right. Just trying to stay inside, trying to stay cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of this Florida weather. It can go back home now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything new on the anime front?
I signed up for a couple new channels, Retro Crush.
Cool.
Okay.
And,
Cool.
And I got just to briefly for some of you who might know this vintage anime, DNA Squared. And
Oh yes.
I watched it originally in Otakon, and I was telling Brent this last night. I was just like, I'm trying to figure out why I kept watching it. And then I went on to Retro Crush, and of all the vintage anime that they had on there, of all the things that they had, and Brent actually gave me some good recommendations. I was like, why do I want to go back to DNA Squared? Why do I want to watch this? Is this still as horrible as I thought it was?
Believe it or not, they actually had that on Crunchyroll, and I can't remember why.
I mean,
I don't know whether it was one of Brent's panels or was a panel somewhere that like, oh yeah, DNA Squared, you should watch that.
Wasn't one of mine.
Same
Wasn't,
sort of
I
thing.
am not
I started watching
no.
it. I'm like, what?
You are not blaming me on that one.
I believe Brent said it was brilliant and it was the best thing ever, and so I took it entirely on his cred, on his massive esteem. And
goodbye, everyone. We're shutting down the stream.
To the manager.
We're done. It's not happening anymore.
Well, I don't know if this necessarily was specifically a panel or an after panel discussion, but it was like, I don't know how I found it.
Yeah.
It just sort of it appeared out of nowhere, and I saw it on Crunchyroll, and I started
probably honestly, and I was telling Brad, this is why I actually went back to it. Probably because the intro song.
Pantsu?
No. The intro song.
Surprisingly, no.
The intro song, which is by Larkin Cell, is an old one, and it's Blurry Eyes, and it's actually really pretty good. And when you listen to it, it hooks you in, and you're just like, it's definitely vintage. You're talking late 80s, early 90s, kind of that theme of J-pop. But it hooks you in. You're just like, oh wow, Larkin Cell's involved with this. Like if you watch Full Metal Alchemist, and you hear the song, the great song from that, and you're like, oh, they did a song for this, and oh, this ought to be good, and it sounds good, and you watch it, and you're just like, a boy who barfs because he's sexually attracted to women. What?
Well, and it was also, as we were talking about, I think ADV put it on every single trailer thing that they did on all their DVDs. So if you ever had anything from ADV, you probably saw a trailer for DNA Squared. Somebody at ADV loved that show. I don't know why. No, it is not. That is a show that did not age well a day after it came out.
Yeah. So they probably should have really considered it actually coming out to begin with, left it in just manga format. But that's fine. That's fine. Obviously, somebody loved it enough to animate it. So
yeah.
There you go.
That's part of how I spent my week.
Okay.
About you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I keep watching Uzaki-chan Wants to Play, and that
nice.
Decadence. I'm sticking with Decadence, and it's interesting. It's genuinely not as sort of shonen as I thought it was going to be, although it's certainly got the shonen aspects to it. It's just kind of an interesting perspective, because usually you have humans doing their thing in a virtual world versus not humans being humans.
Oh,
And you
that's
can't
what's
figure out
going
what
on.
yeah, you don't.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, is the human part of the world the real world?
Huh.
And somehow these things are there in that real world, or is the human
Ah.
world entirely virtual? Because it seems to really be pushing that this is nothing but a virtual construct, and yet you see things going on that make it really evident that the machines in this human guys, that there's biological things going on in this other. So I'm
Huh.
just
Yeah.
so it's interesting to sort of figure it out. It's
That's
not
cool.
the greatest anime ever done in the universe, but it's at least interesting for trying to sort out some of those plot elements.
It's nice having something that's
Unlike
unusual.
Uzaki-chan wants to play, which is Uzaki-chan's just fun. He's just cute. And I still haven't seen any more Lapis. Lapis, for whatever reason, hasn't thrown anything out in like a little bit, but that's more than likely because it's not been translated yet. So
Yeah.
they're focusing on other things.
Sure, absolutely. Cool. No, I've made no progress on my anime things, to my eternal shame. I have not been watching any anime. I know. It's terrible. I was actually, full disclosure, I was a little under the weather this week, so that didn't help. But then also,
COVID.
hope not. Uh-oh. COVID, go to claim Steve, or claim JJ. Uh-oh.
No, where did he go?
Oh no,
Okay.
he's dead.
Who knows?
Oh, I'm still here. Oh, what happened?
Okay.
Hold on.
It's thinking. There we go. Okay. Almost lost you.
I just got a 404 error.
Huh.
I'm like, what did I get a 404 error out of this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
404 camera not found. That's strange.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
something happened.
Hey, give us
Well, I got to return Snake Eyes for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Snake Eyes.
Yeah, I guess JJ's got haunted tech now as well.
You've thrown the curse onto me. No.
Oh no.
Yeah, we're not on Halloween yet.
In Pompoko, I love how in that one shot of the panel show about is it haunted? They actually have somebody on the panel like cosplaying as a ghost, with like the makeup and all that. It's like, that's cool. I know what that is. But yeah,
I get that one.
I get it exactly. Now I still want to get back to Sword Art Online. Honestly, I still need. I have a strong need to finish season 1 of Sword Art Online. Really enjoying that.
Well, how much did you get through?
I'm up to episode 6, I think, 6 or 8, something along those lines.
Okay. And you didn't object like 50% of the population out there?
No. I found what do people object to?
I can't figure out what they object to because it's like, oh, it's just so bland, and Kirito is such a bland character, and the whole show is just it's just nothing super great. And it's like, well, it's not trying to be the next greatest thing to humanity. It's a anime about a video game.
Also, I find Kirito a very non-bland character. He is a thoughtful character. He is an intellectual person, which I very much appreciate. That he thinks through things, and then when things don't go well, like that affects him. He doesn't just bounce off him. He's like, crud, I need to change my approach to things. It's one of the things I really like about it, actually. Yeah.
Well, and I've seen the discussion about he's just OP. Just because he was a beater, doesn't he knows too much. He's too powerful. He's not a realistic kind of thing. And it's like, I walked into another world with a smartphone.
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna say
OP for that.
Let me show you Dragon Ball Z.
You got it.
It's like one of the most popular anime of all time, frankly, worldwide. OP-ness just makes no sense in that show because everyone is OP all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like, you enjoy a show because of what your experience is in the world, in life, etc., and you get great joy out of it. Nobody needs to go and rain on your parade.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to give it a 10 on my anime list, give it a 10.
Mm-hmm.
If you bounce right off of it and you say this is the worst trash, give it a 4. But
Sure.
just don't tear people down and tear
Yeah.
the thing down just to be grinchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I can totally see why people would not find SAO interesting, right? It just, the premise, the mix of characters and all that, I can totally get that. I
Right.
can totally understand folks bouncing off of it. I just don't understand folks going, okay, that's, I think, the thing. What I find so impressive about SAO is how carefully constructed it is.
Right.
How well it establishes its characters, how well it has, it is assembling them around and saying this person would interact with this person for these reasons. There's very little random in the show, which I appreciate.
Right. Well, it's also nice that I don't have any idea other than having seen SAO as like a trailer on Crunchyroll and then being like, oh, this might be something I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea where its origination was. Like, was it just a game? Was it a game and a manga? Was it something else? But there's budget behind SAO.
No kidding.
It's
Yeah.
not it's
Yeah.
not small. I mean, it's not the landmark anime of the entire universe.
Mhm.
But there's genuinely cash behind how it's done.
Light novels, interestingly.
Aha.
Originally a web novel from 2002 to 2008. Then light novel starting 2009. Anime TV series 2012.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I didn't hate that. I just never, after a certain point, I was just like, okay, and I just kind of moved on from it. But no, overwhelming. Oh my god, this sucks. I think it's definitely geared toward audience, and it does have a budget because I think the audience is there. I just think it's more of a niche audience than it is something for a general consumption. But
yeah,
it's doing really well. So if I was the owner of the licensing of that thing, yeah, of course I would. I'd keep it going.
Well, and that's the thing. I also, it probably also has that problem of high expectations. People hearing about SAO and assuming that it is God's gift to mankind and coming in and going, well, wait, this isn't blowing my mind. It's like, well, no, it's not that.
Well, and I think now that they're moving on, SAO2 derivative, but still, you could find interesting elements enough to watch it.
Fair.
Gun Gale started to sort of water it down. Gun Gale 2 just sort of was walking parallel to things. And I am trying to watch SAO War in the Underworld, Alicization, and I'm slogging through it at like an episode every 2 months or better. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Kind of one of those things where it's
that's
like
what happened to me.
Yeah, I just can't get the momentum moving with it.
That's what happened to me at the end of it. By the time I gave up, I was just like, going, okay, I'm finding other things that are more for me. And I actually thought that this would actually be something that would appeal greatly to me, but it just went off. It just wasn't. This wasn't there for me. And again, it's one of those things where it's just like, it's not you, it's me.
Yeah. Sure. Yep.
Well, I mean, certainly, SAO 1, it was its release time was a good place and time. You know what I mean? And it's like, as they've stretched it out, times around that have changed. So it's like COVID, the wonderful year of 2020 and COVID. So I'm sure there's a lot of straight comedies that are really getting a lot of traffic because everybody needs to laugh right now. We all need funny.
Yeah. And interesting, in those articles I was reading a couple weeks ago, one of them talked about how this was, what's his name? Gonna annoy me. It's one of the people who sort of reinvented the media mix back in the 90s.
Carl Jung?
Yeah. He theorized that most franchises have about a decade. of like hotness, right? Like you really have about a decade's worth of big success, and then it'll still be around. You can still sell things off of it, but people will have moved on by that point, you know.
Right.
And so, and I feel SAO is kind of getting to that point now, where they're like,
Right.
you know, how do we keep this rolling in a way that doesn't tick off the fans to, you know, before it just kind of fades.
Right.
Well, I mean, when you enter the door at Pokemon at 10, a decade later, you're not in the same place you are when you were 10.
Yep.
You know, when you're 20,
you
you've got
are.
other things. If you are, you know, kudos. If you could be 10 years old at 20, I'd like to know how, because typically people look at me funny when I dress like that. So, but you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you've got that 10-year period where you've got all the t-shirts and the socks and the plushies and everything else. And then that's it. At 20, you know, you're on to other things. And some people exit entirely, you know, some people, once they can vote and once they can drive, it's time to be, you know, doing things that are stereotypical adulty things.
Have you guys seen Recorder and Runcell? Okay.
Gesundheit?
It is not a very well-known series. I stumbled across it on Crunchyroll. I think it was literally one of those, I'm going to scroll to R and just scroll down R and see what's in R.
Okay.
The premise of the show is a short series in like 5-minute episodes. The idea is that it is about I think a girl who is 12 or 13 and her younger brother who is like preschool age. But he has a physical weirdness, whatever, and so he looks like he's like 25. He physically grew extremely fast, and so the joke is that she's constantly having to rescue him because he keeps getting into difficult situations where like he will go home with one of his kindergarten classmates holding hands with like a little 5-year-old, and just dancing, just skipping along
And the police show up.
Exactly,
That sounds really familiar, though. Gosh,
Yeah.
I can't think of whether I've seen it or not. Are they 3-minute episodes, 5-minute episodes?
3 or 5, something like that. Yeah.
Gosh, that sounds so familiar.
Yeah, and it's just think of being 10 forever and what that might be like when you're an adult. I'm like, might be some disadvantages. Just thinking.
Well, it's funny. I saw something that was a news bit on MSN like a couple days ago, where they were talking about this kid who's 12, and he plays basketball, and he's 6'2".
Wow.
It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my
Wow.
God!
Actually,
can you imagine
like,
the pain,
do you keep
pain of
growing
that
at that
growth
point? Yeah, well, do you keep growing at that point? I mean,
Well,
you still have time to grow. So is
the-
this guy going to be like 8 feet tall?
There's a story on QI of the tallest man on record who is, I think, from the U.S. actually, and he was over 8 feet when he died. He was in his 20s.
Massive coronary problems.
Well, that was the thing. He was still growing in his 20s.
This is like the pituitary gland kind of problem where it doesn't shut off your growth hormones.
Right.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I do also want to add the fact that his photo in the Guinness Book of World Records has him standing next to like his brother and his mother or something, and they're both like literally half his height.
Yeah.
Basically, and the caption is, "This is the tallest man in the world. He's the one with the glasses."
Beautifully understated. Didn't he have something weird? He had like custom shoes made because they were like a size 19 or something. It was like insane.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
there was a great interview with Hulk Hogan where they asked him about some of the stuff being told that has been circulated around Andre the Giant and his behavior and so forth. And Hogan said, "Well, I'm going to tell you one thing about Andre the Giant. I don't think he was ever comfortable a day in his life."
Watch the documentary. It's sad, but it's awesome. Yeah. And that statement is like ringing true through the whole documentary. He figuratively, mentally, and in society, he was never comfortable ever.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently the scene that he did in was it Princess Bride?
Yes.
he was already having health problems at that point, and those scenes wrecked him,
Oh.
wrecked him. Or he's just slamming the guy up against the rock, right?
Yeah.
They were
Yep.
trying to figure out how to do it the least painful way to do that scene, because his body was just such a wreck at that point. And it's just a sad story, because he's actually, again, you watch the documentary, you realize that he's just a lovable guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is. But it was.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ah.
Sadly, those situations are the body out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not fun. Y'all hear that? And welcome back, everyone, to the latest anime news for the week ending August 15th, 2020. That's right, it is 2020. He said as he tried to pull up the document real quick. Let us begin with news from Studio Mappa, the studio behind Yuri on Ice and Zombieland Saga, which has a new original series in the works, and we will not have long to wait. Yay! Announced during this week's Seiyu to Yo Asobi program, the new sports anime is titled Taiso Samurai, or Gymnastics Samurai, and is set to debut on October 10th, which is not that far away. As you might have guessed, the story centers on a gymnastics team, specifically the once powerful Japanese men's gymnastics team. It's set back in 2002, and it follows Shotaro Aragaki, a former member of the team who, despite still training strenuously every day, is no longer able to compete to his expectations. I wonder what'll happen. His coach advises him to retire, but a certain encounter takes place and changes his fate. So far, it sounds like a pretty classic sports anime, and if Yuri on Ice is anything to go by, Mappa can definitely make a popular sports anime. Main staff members who work together on Zombieland Saga are returning for this project, including director Hisatoshi Shimizu, series scriptwriter Shigeru Murakoshi, and character designer Kasumi Fukagawa. So my question is, what on earth does a sports anime that looks like Zombieland Saga look like?
Didn't Mappa do BNA, Brand New Animal?
I think so.
So I'm just trying to wrap my skull around a gymnastics anime that looks like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which BNA was, I mean, it had a lot of kinetic action. It had the typical Mappa palette of colors. So I don't see probably that it's going to be all that different looking than just that. I mean, that because I think BNA was last season.
Yeah.
Or the earlier this or winter season this 2019, 2020. So I imagine it's going to have that same sort of look.
Fair enough, yeah. I'm kind of curious as to whether this was planned around the Olympics.
Had to have been.
Yeah,
and
I would imagine.
And if so, if it was originally going to have premiered around the Olympics but got delayed because of COVID, they're like, okay, well, let's just make it anyway,
Well, if it's ready to go, then it was probably done for the Olympics.
Yeah, it's true.
Which is, I mean, they've delayed the Olympics to 2021. Like, so it's interesting. Interesting in a sad kind of way, because it's like you could imagine people being like, okay, we're set. We got the premiere set. The games are going to begin. And as soon as it happens, we're going to release this and we're going to ride that wave. And now it's like, well, we got to release it. We've spent all this money and all this time. We're not anywhere near this.
We've had so many different things go wrong on other different shows, but nothing stops the Olympics.
Yeah. Ever since post-war, it's been good to go, regardless of what's going on in the world. Oh, yeah, here we are now.
2020.
Just imagine all the poor programmers who have to code all this stuff and just set something up for 4 years after this thing.
Yeah.
And like, oh great, now I'm gonna have this one exception for this 1 year where nothing lines up.
Yeah.
That's
So
what
annoying.
happened to my theater. That's what happened to
Oh,
my
yeah?
theater. Well, first of all, COVID happened in the middle of our season, so we had an entire season that we were trying to figure out what to do, and then finally we just gave up and canceled everything. Now we're looking at 2021, and we're not even sure that they're gonna have a season for 2021.
Wow.
And so, but the thing of it is that, more to the point of the production, you have money that's involved. So these things have involved. So imagine all the contracts and all the merchandising and the licensing and all that stuff for this anime. And then suddenly they're like, oh, yeah, sorry about the Olympics. So
Yeah, you're not going to have a giant pool of people right here, right now for the Olympics that are going to be merch hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, all the Airbnbs, all those cancellations, everybody's looking at loss of income and trying to figure out, how can we circle up the wagons now that this isn't happening?
And to be like, they're not even allowing people into the country, right? Like, it's not even like, oh, well, tourists will come. No, they won't.
Yeah, there are no tourists. Well, except for a handful of countries. Like, I can't even imagine the exhaustive list. It's trying to find the countries that you can go to Japan from.
Like those poor guys, those poor folks who made this anime, they're like sitting there just like what we did in the theater, which is this like, hey, we made this wonderful thing to be seen, and we were hoping for this audience this big, and now your audience is suddenly this big, if it exists at all, and you're just throwing it on the line, and then all the animators, all the voice actors, and all that stuff are just like going, at least I got.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's their art that's not getting the exposure that they had hoped, and that really sucks. I feel that.
Yeah.
Wow, this is not an anime that would have appealed to me necessarily. I'm feeling for the people involved with it, and how this has to happen for them.
Yeah, it's rough. Absolutely. But that's not the only new anime on the list. Bandai Namco has officially announced the anime associated with their new franchise, Saikyo Kami's Mode. The franchise was announced back in July and is planned to include a rhythm card arcade game, the new hotness, as well as the anime project. The franchise has the main themes of sumo, taiko drumming, and music. Characters will have both a su mode and a kamiz mode that they can switch between at will, and will battle to become a yokozuna, which is the highest rank one can achieve in sumo wrestling. Both the anime and the arcade game are set to premiere this fall, with the anime playing on YouTube and Tokyo MX. The question, though, is, Steve, are you in?
That's how I'm going to die. I'm going to be on that game.
As a sumo taiko drummer?
As a sumo taiko drummer, and you're going to see me going and do it because I love that. Sumo wrestling and those drums, I love that. And you're going to see me pounding away on those drums, and then suddenly the sticks are going to drop, and you're going to be going, I did what I loved.
What is, it's not a fundoshi. Is it a washi? Is it the sumo belt that the sumo wrestlers wear? What is it called?
Good question. It's definitely fundoshi-esque, but it's not.
Yeah, but I thought it's a washi, but I don't know what that. I'm not sure whether that's just a name I
washi
made
paper,
up.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I'm sure there's a word for it.
It's a Mawashi.
Mawashi.
Are you going to be allowed to play this in the arcade wearing that?
Sure. Why not?
I bet. I won't be allowed to play it in the arcade wearing that. I'd be like, no, not you. Get out.
Some of us will not be allowed.
Yeah.
That won't be a thing.
That's just an interesting card game arcade rhythm taiko sumo.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Did somebody drink too much and hit their head? Where did this come from?
So here's what I think it is. Sumo wrestling is having issues getting audience.
Okay. Right.
And so somebody said, how do we appeal to the young people? They go to the video games, don't they? Let's do a video game.
They do the magical talking box thing, right?
The show almost came out of my nose. That was hilarious.
23 Skidoo. Here we go. Ye oldie timey video games. Okay.
And also, in fairness, like, those
Wow.
taiko drumming arcade games are popular. Rhythm
Yeah,
games are popular.
I've seen them play. That looks fun.
Mhm.
But Sumo Taiko, where does the card game come in? I mean, is that just
That's a good question. So I'm assuming it's
power
either.
up?
Yeah. I'm assuming it's either one of two things. Either like there is a card element to it where like, you're dealt 3 cards and they have abilities, whatever. Or
Right.
like,
Oh, okay.
you are earning cards that go on like the Gundam games have like an ID card that you bring in and like you can put your pilot data on it. So you could like earn cards that go on your token, which then you
that'd be
take back
cool.
home and you do. Who
That's
knows?
funky.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I'm like, this is unusual, but
Oh yeah.
I'm very curious to see how it goes because it's not one of those things where we decided to make a sumo arcade game. Oh no. We're gonna throw like 3 things in the pot here and stir it up and see what happens. Like
Whatever sticks, we're gonna go with it.
I'll be the first one to try it at Otakon, and
Yeah.
I'll never do that.
Absolutely. This is also not the only anime today. Bandai Namco, a new television anime is in the works for the comedy franchise Himitsu Kesha Taka no Tsume, or Secret Society Eagle Talon. The new Secret Society Eagle Talon Golden Spell anime will premiere on October 4th, with production by DLE Inc. Voice actor Joji Nakata will join the cast for the new series. As in the previous Eagle Talon iterations, all of the voices will be performed by Frogman, who is also the series director, script supervisor, scriptwriter, character designer, and editor. So this is a very specific concept. The original Eagle Talon Flash anime centers on the titular Secret Society and its rather bumbling attempts at world takeover. DLE launched the first TV series in 2006, which spawned 9 films and has 7 anime seasons so far, not including the upcoming one. I believe those are all Flash. Interestingly, the very first legally authorized anime Crunchyroll ever streamed was an Eagle Talon short back in 2008. The story of the new anime series begins when Eagle Talon discovers a secret spell that can control people's will with a single word. However, the spell and the program that is developing it are stolen. The series will continue to comment on current events in a comedic way, including a recent news item related to the coronavirus and working from home. Unlike previous iterations where each episode was standalone, the story arc of the new series will unfold across its whole 12-episode run. Flash animation? Flash animation?
I'm not crazy about the Flash animation, but I think I'll buy into it and watch it.
Sure.
This sounds up my alley. If it's along the lines of like Milk Chan and Shin-chan, then I'll probably watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. And when I say Flash animation, that is not a negative. It is just that is the first time I've heard something coming out of a Flash animation in a very long time. Like, I thought the era of Flash adaptations was gone, but apparently, my gosh.
Well, if you're a one person show, which it sounds like it really is,
Got a point.
You go with I guess what you're most easily familiar with, and apparently it would be the Flash animation style.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
Wow.
I'll give it a go.
I'm going to presume that given that format, it's going to be another like 3 to 5 minutes. Probably 3. As a one-person show, probably 3 is going to be about as much as you're going to be able to crank out. But yeah.
Considering they just added their first voice actor, that kind of tells you something.
Yeah.
Wow. Last up in new anime this week, a series of anime shorts made in partnership with Minami Shimabara. That's a lot of syllables. City in Nagasaki Prefecture. Director Okamoto has partnered with Triff Studio and Minami Shimabara to produce a 4-episode series of shorts set in the city titled Shiro the Giant and the Castle of Ice. The first 1.5-minute long episode premiered this week on YouTube with subtitles in English and simplified Chinese. The rest of the series will be released gradually between now and December. Okamoto serves as character designer and production manager as well as director, so another series with a lot of parts being run by one person. For such a short series, the voice cast is pretty impressive, with several well-known voice actors playing roles. These include Yoshitsugu Matsuoka, who voices Kirito from Sword Art Online, and several other similar protagonists. Ayumu Murase, the voice of main character Hinata from Haikyuu, and Iruma from Welcome to Demon School, Iruma-kun, as well as Romy Park, the voice of Fullmetal Alchemist Edward Elric, and many, many, many other things. And this definitely sort of ties back to that classic thing of anime tourism, right?
Yeah.
And doing all that stuff to do that. And I thinking back to this, and we've seen a variety of this. It seems like a few short anime episodes is a good way of going with this, as opposed to committing to like a 12-episode anime series. Where you can kind of get things across, you can include things about that area without feeling like you're committing to a huge project.
Well, I mean, also you're talking a municipal budget.
Yeah.
And for I mean, it's not the trash collection department. It's not, the sewer and water. It's literally your tourism department. And, I have to imagine for a district of an area, it's probably a minuscule budget.
Mm-hmm.
So this, not to say eggs in one basket, but I would imagine doing a 1-minute short at like 3:00 in the morning live action commercial, be like, come and visit. We have the greatest, matzo balls. And thank you. I mean, that would cost you some money, and then probably have a little bit left over to print some flyers. I imagine the investment in having an anime done is going to be probably almost all of their budget.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're going to have probably next to nothing left over in the time involved. So yeah, short.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Committing to a 12 episode where they're 22 minutes a shot. No, there's no way in hell they'd have that kind of cash.
No.
And increasingly, it seems like it is hard for these regional areas to collaborate. To be part of a production committee for a larger project. It's going to be basically, this is the anime about your prefecture done. So yeah, I think it seems wise. I'll be very curious to see kind of what they do. Like, how do you do a series like this with sequences that short to advertise a city? Who knows?
Well, as I say, Little Osaka Mama was a short done in the sort of webtoon kind of style, and it was a joke about brother and sister, and the sister literally she had an Osaka dialect usage, so it was kind of funny. It's like, oh, haha, you guys are brother and sister, and you came from the same place, but she's talking like she's a country person from Osaka. And there was another one, I wish I could remember what the name of it was, a little cute little blonde-haired girl, and the guy comes from Tokyo, and he's at this area, and it's not Gifu, but it's some prefecture that he moves from Tokyo, and they go, all it does in each episode is they're like going to school, and then after school they just happen to be somewhere like, oh, look, that's the tower of this town. They're like, oh, that's cool. Nagoya. Thank you.
Thank you, Audible.
Thank you, Audible. That, I mean, that it was done, it was really cute. And each little bit showed you a little bit more of Nagoya. It was some, oh, we like to eat this. Well, we like miso this certain style. Well, we're from this town, near Nagoya.
Gotcha.
We like our miso this way. So it's like, okay, that was cute. It was lighthearted. It kept kind of moving. It was enjoyable. It's like, I'm just kind of surprised you don't see more prefectures pulling each town and city's tourism budget. And like you're saying, coming together with a collaboration and being like, if you throw in, 50,000 yen, you throw in 50,000 yen, all of us together, we can do something for the prefecture that will attract people, not necessarily to your town alone, but to our entire area. And then we can benefit from that.
There was an anime a while back called Isekai Izakaya. And it was about a cafe that is...
Cafe to Another World?
Yeah, Cafe to Another World. Yep.
Yeah.
And
I enjoyed that.
I loved it. And every episode ends by featuring a real-life izakaya. So there's a live action segment of a guy going to a real life izakaya and saying, "Here's the food there," and I'm like, the Izakaya Association threw some money in the pot for the anime series, and that then they get the free advertising from that in the show. I think it makes sense, right? Like, if we all put our money together, this can help all of us.
Well, they also had that short that was it wasn't like somebody, or it wasn't like Mommy San loves eating or something, but it was an office worker lady, and she would go after work to a different izakaya, and she'd sit and she'd have like edamame and an asahi, and she'd finish it off and she'd go pshoo, and it was her relaxing that she had just this very simple meal at an izakaya and how much she enjoyed it. And it's like, wow, this is really obvious that you're saying, after a long day at work, why don't you go to a little izakaya, frequent one of your locals, and just relax and have something nice. It's like, okay, it didn't specifically feature a specific place or a specific food, but the entirety of it was how relaxing it is after a long day of work. Go relax, spend some money, enjoy yourself. Like, yeah, I got you.
So what I would like to see is an anime, travel anime, is a video for Baltimore here.
For Baltimore?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Come visit the Inner Harbor. Please stay at the Inner Harbor.
Right.
Don't go anywhere outside the 6-block area of the Inner Harbor, please.
It's not that bad.
And scene.
Not that bad. It's not that bad.
Wait a minute. See, this is why I don't write anime, because I just end things in like less than 2 seconds.
It would be funny to do kind of like that one I was talking about, where they're always making fun of their prefecture and what a bad reputation it is to have to do that, and then like at the end of every episode, like they get shot. But like in the next episode they're fine, right? But it's just playing off that just, well, obviously you're going to get killed if you come here, but it's still,
But still, you can enjoy some of the sights before you get murdered. Oh, sweet.
All right, moving on to a story that got a lot of attention this week. Is anybody looking to buy a streaming service and got about $1 billion laying around? Anyone? As of this week, Crunchyroll is apparently up for sale. AT&T, Crunchyroll's current parent company, reportedly offered to sell the service to Sony for $1.5 billion, but Sony balked at that price. For anyone not aware, Sony operates Crunchyroll's main competitor, Funimation. The offered price tag effectively values Crunchyroll at about $500 per subscriber. The service just passed 3 million subscribers on July 28th, with more than 70 million registered users in total. The sale is now apparently being pitched to other possible buyers as well as Sony, with an asking price of at least $1 billion. According to tech website The Information, this move possibly demonstrates AT&T's willingness to sell valuable assets to bring down its $151 billion debt load. The company has apparently been strategically selling off assets over the last couple of years. Now, it was reported back in May that Warner Media, the subsidiary that owns Crunchyroll, was looking to sell the service. But a new CEO was appointed in May, and so the decision was delayed to allow him time to evaluate business and strategy and kind of get used to things. I guess he evaluated that they still don't want to hang on to it. So Crunchyroll launched back in 2006. And you may remember that Funimation and Crunchyroll had a brief content sharing partnership several years ago, which ended in 2018 after Sony acquired a majority stake in Funimation in 2017. It'll be interesting to see what happens once decisions are made on this. If Sony does acquire Crunchyroll, will we see a partnership before the services again, or other big changes? What is kind of the over and under from you guys on any possible changes coming out of this?
Depends on the amount of goodwill. Because Funimation, it was not streaming back that far ago. So Crunchyroll certainly has the greater amount of goodwill, and I don't think it has necessarily greater name recognition, but I think the goodwill gained over that period of time where it was streaming by itself would give value to the brand. So that if you saw Sony decide to buy it, you might see the survival of the name of Crunchyroll and or just the flat out sticking together of Funimation Crunchyroll.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah,
funny roll.
funny. I like it.
Funny roll. But
Crunchy
you know what I
Nation?
mean? It's like it's just kind of hard to envision anybody wanting to buy Crunchyroll to compete with Sony and Funimation. You know what I mean?
If anyone is going to buy a Crunchyroll, my fear, unfortunately, is that it's not to have a business strategy with Crunchyroll. I think it's the business strategy of acquiring Crunchyroll is to liquidate Crunchyroll, so that titles will be sold. Yeah, that the titles will be sold out, and maybe Fun Animation will just buy them, wait for that to happen, buy them at bargain prices, and bring it in. If AT&T doesn't care. I mean, let's just put that right out there right now. They don't care. They're dropping it because they're revenue poor, they're cash poor. This is really a cash for AT&T, so they don't care what happens to Crunchyroll. So whoever's going to come up with the money to meet their price, they're going to sell to it, and they're not going to care.
And that's,
so hopefully that, if you have Sony on the other hand, that, there's a possibility, I think, that they would actually like do a merger of the Funimation and Crunchyroll or something of that nature. They would probably just agglomerate it.
Well,
but if you had a Sony esque type other company that won in competition, that's going to be really hard to find, because I think right now broadcasters want something larger than that. I think if Sony were to buy it, it was just to expand what they already have, and they would just buy the entire house. I think that's the best option, honestly, for Crunchyroll.
Yeah, I mean,
I just don't see anybody else buying them without liquidating them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Crunchyroll does seem to be successful. By all accounts, they're making money. They've grown their subscriber base, quite well. They've done multiple press releases over the past few years saying, "Hey, we have this milestone. We're making this much money." So it seems to me, and again, obviously it'll depend on who buys them, if they do. And to be clear, companies get shopped around all the time, and it doesn't mean they do get bought. But I can see a similar sort of media conglomerate grabbing Crunchyroll for the subscriber base and saying, "Hey, this will be a nice part of the portfolio. It'll be fine." If it's acquired by Sony, I think kind of the ideal solution is, like we were talking about before on the Discord, I think kind of the ideal solution would be both services run simultaneously with content sharing. So if you're on Funimation, you get to see all Crunchyroll stuff. If you're on Crunchyroll, you see all Funimation stuff. It's kind of whatever subscription you want. Part of the problem is
but I mean, I think that element of goodwill, that if you're Sony and you own both, you don't really need Funimation. And I don't mean that in like you fire everybody and it's all gone.
Right.
I mean, if you're Sony, you acquire both, the amount of goodwill that you get from Crunchyroll for its prior streaming capabilities and its content and its subscriber base, I think, given the relative newness of Funimation as a streamer, that you would fold that into Crunchyroll, so that instead of sharing content, you would transfer the entirety of the Funimation content streaming onto Crunchyroll and leave Funimation with your licensing and all of the back house work.
Okay, so Crunchyroll just becomes the streaming platform, and Funimation is the licensing. Arm.
They go back to doing what Funimation initially was doing, which is acquiring the material, and then you just use Crunchyroll as your portal out.
That's a very interesting idea.
One thing I could say that would terrify me would be if Disney got an idea that buying Crunchyroll and
darkest timeline.
Stop.
And this is not to be mean, but buying it and then burying it. Because even though it's not in the exact same vein as Disney, it's still a streaming competitor. And if it's up for sale, you can buy and do with what you want. And so if you don't find that valuable, you can say, I'd rather bury it to avoid the competition.
And let's not forget, Disney licensed frickin' Doraemon.
Yep.
Like, they are not unaware of the power of anime.
But they wouldn't, you don't want that as a competition.
You
can get a hold of it.
I am presenting that as evidence that I think Disney is are no fools here. I can totally see them saying, "This would be convenient."
Yeah,
Yeah.
what could we do by taking the assets of that,
Mhm.
burying it, and then using whatever remaining license stream to say
Mhm.
Disney Plus now has Crunchyroll content? You're like,
Mhm.
oh no, don't do that.
Yep. That'd be really interesting. I don't know. Oops, sorry. That's pretty much. I don't. And it's tough because it's funny because prior to this week, the biggest complaint about uh, anime streaming services is that there are too many of them, and we hate paying for like 5 different anime streaming services. And now we're frightened about one of them being shut down. It's like, But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is interesting that, and partly it's because these are the two big ones, right? These are the ones with the best relationships in Japan, the ones that are
Yeah.
constantly licensing things, and Crunchyroll being one of the ones that is funding new anime, and it's helping to make
Yeah.
things happen. So that would be quite interesting. The other side of the coin is it's what was I reading? There's some book about this saying that the thing is, acquiring companies to liquidate them historically is fairly rare. It happens, certainly, but usually when a company gets acquired, it's because you want to keep that business going. Otherwise, why would you buy it? So I think at least the
I
the
would hope so.
odds, yeah, the odds are not high. In other words, that a company that buys it, I certainly agree that it is a distinct possibility here.
Well, let me give you a real example. Infoseek. We discussed this before, some time before. Infoseek was a very real competitor of Yahoo and a precursor to Google.
Mm-hmm.
So Infoseek had a really good search engine. They had really, the algorithms they were using made it a
Right.
really good search engine.
Mm-hmm.
Disney, I'm not picking on Disney. I'm not bad mouthing Disney. I'm just saying this is business decisions, business.
Mm-hmm.
Disney was looking to acquire portal content knowledge to be able to more effectively, utilize merchandisation and commercialization of their properties. So they acquired lock, stock, and barrel in the 90s. Infoseek, the whole thing. They dropped coin, acquired it. Infoseek disappeared. Like, they discontinued Infoseek as a thing. And then they used the constituent parts and people of Infoseek to build into Disney and then launch Disney Go.
Yeah.
And it was a family-friendly portal. It wouldn't do certain things. It was limited in any kinds of content that you could get. And it wasn't, no offense to them, but it was an utter failure. So they just sort of rolled Disney Go sort of kind of away and just
Absorbed.
really they just massively increased their internal structural capacity for the internet with all those parts. But they bought Infoseek for the sole express purpose of burying it and then using its assets and knowledge to further a business goal. So that's what, an acquisition of Crunchyroll, you know what I mean? There's the very real possibility. They're doing something you want, and they've got the equipment and the people to do that, and that you can acquire it, bury it, and then disperse those assets in a way that functions for your business purposes better than just having it continue as Crunchyroll.
Yeah, I just wonder what Crunchyroll is doing technically, business-wise, that would be that yeah, because I mean, certainly there have been some things that Crunchyroll's platform is impressive technically. There were one or two articles I read about somebody saying, to have 70 million, registered users and like 3 million like subscribers and pushing out this much content, obviously video streaming is not as hard as it used to be.
Right.
But they clearly have a platform that's pretty effective. It would be fascinating to see one of the smaller media companies come along and say, our streaming platform isn't very good. We're just going to use your tech.
a smaller group ponying up $1 billion is going to be
true.
And I mean, because you figure in a lot of the traditional acquisitions, you have not only cash, but you also have, you trade securities back and forth and, debt notes, et cetera, and make all those sort of in-house changes. If you're a small enough group, nobody's going to be like, yeah, we want some shares of your podunk know nothing. They're going to be like, yeah, you got $1 billion cash? Just can you drop it right here on the table before we, seriously entertain your offer?
And that's the interesting thing is I think AT&T clearly needs the money, and so they are valuing Crunchyroll rather highly. I can't imagine. Well, no, I can. I was going to say I can't imagine every Crunchyroll subscriber being worth $500. Like that is a huge valuation for any given organization. But I can see it being attractive.
Well, as I say, the question is how much, you have got Crunchyroll, the streaming service, and you have Crunchyroll, the store.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, so you have an ease of that platform sort of transition. So if you're watching, use a God of High School. You really want a God of High School T-shirt? You can be watching God of High School and click on the store link, and go buy that thing.
Yep.
So I think for potential merch sales, for ancillary business opportunities, and in-app kind of information sales, if you're going to do the Facebook thing, I think you can generate fairly decent content, out of the 3 million subscribers, but certainly 70 million people who have filled out where do you live, what's your gender, what's your household income, and they've set up all the accounts. That's mineable data.
True. Very
And
true.
I mean, and data mining is a value in and of of itself. So $500, I don't know what data mining's worth. Obviously, Mark Zuckerberg does, and it's worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
And arguably, same sort of thing that I just saw Jeff Bezos talking about his $189 billion value. That, you know what I mean? Amazon makes tremendous money from transactions.
Yep.
And don't even fool yourself that they're not mining your data.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why your Amazon ads always pop up in the little sidebar of stuff, is because they've mined your data and they're streaming that little ad to you based on your choices. It's like, it's
not always very well, but that
Well, just to give you context on cost for data mining for a nonprofit, if you would get, say, another magazine's mailing list, say you decide to get National Geographic's mailing list, for about 10,000 names on there, with about a little over 1% error, meaning that there are incomplete on there, is usually around $5,000, or it was around $5,000. And that's actually determining what kind of data. So if you're a nonprofit, you're going for the cheapest address kind of thing. So that's cheap end. That's the cheap end of it. So if you don't, the more data that you want, the more that you're going to have to spend.
Right.
So it kind of depends on what data you want, but it just gives you an idea that if you're spending $5,000 on 10,000 people, that's that's a chunk of change for data that, if you're thinking 70 million, how much that can be a lot of money.
Yeah.
And depending upon who wants it and what their message is. I mean, can you imagine just so here's the Donald J. Trump campaign buying the 70 million member list of Crunchyroll for their kind of thing. But that's what they do. That's how they get. So if it's worth it, if it's worth it to them, then they'll definitely pony up the money at a point there.
Yeah. We'll see.
There we go.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting to see how it goes the next several months as to what AT&T decides to do.
Yeah. Who knows?
And what a fall! I mean, this is so many of these long-term things. Sears, and Roebuck, Sears Holdings, all these long-term things. AT&T, Atlantic Telegraph and Telephone, all these iconic, 20, 30 years ago, the things that were like, these are investments you can't go wrong. It's like investing in Exxon or investing, it's a landmark thing. It will never go bad. It'll be wine and song and sunshine forever. And then all these things now are just rocketing down the toilet.
But then again, AT&T came from Ma Bell.
Yeah.
And and they were forced to splinter up to what, 7 different companies, I think it was.
Yeah.
AT&T was the most successful one of them, I think.
Yeah, AT&T, Bell Southwest. You had some other all the baby bells that came off of Bell telephone systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just all of everything's just circling the event horizon, spinning in.
Like, you were going to go in a different direction, but
I know you did, but we're not doing that.
No,
we can talk about the Coriolis effect and all that, but we're not going to go there. We're going to take the higher road. Go a little sciencey, black hole-y kind of thing.
Fair enough.
Do that.
So, speaking of things spiraling, first Kinokuniya bookstores in Sydney, next the whole of Australia. The Australian Classification Board has officially banned all sales and imports of No Game, No Life novels, Volume 1, 2, and 9. Volumes 1 and 2 are classified as RC or refused classification due to being publications that, quote, describe or depict in a way that is likely to cause offense to a reasonable adult, a person who is or appears to be a child under 18, whether the person is engaged in sexual activity or not, end quote. What will cause offense to a reasonable adult is a rather broad standard for a law, but the board have decided that No Game, No Life definitely will. Volume 9 was also flagged on publications that, quote, describe, depict, express, or otherwise deal with matters in such a way that they offend against the standards of morality, decency, and propriety, generally accepted by reasonable adults to the extent that they should not be classified, end quote. Titles that have been classified as RC cannot be sold, hired, advertised, or legally imported in Australia. This contains content that is very high in impact and falls outside generally accepted community standards. No Game, No Life. The anime was classified by the board when it came out as MA15+, for strong sexual themes, and is legally restricted to people above the age of 15, but is otherwise available. So this continues the trend, certainly, that we have seen before. What intrigues me about this is this seems oddly targeted at only a few works.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what their axe to grind is, but just and Brent, Steve, you guys tell me. I've only ever watched the anime. I really enjoyed the anime, and I have
no idea.
Is the manga is it like really just saucy?
Let's find out.
Stuff or something, like, you know what I mean? It's like the anime was fine. The anime was really good. I actually enjoyed it. I was
still
hoping there would be more. I watched the movie that they did, No Game, No Life. And it's like I don't see where they're coming up with this.
Watch the anime, and I don't see the purpose. I mean, it's just like any other anime for a more older person. When I say older, I mean someone like 15, 16 years old watching it. And so I think it's
Becca, I'm a totally unreasonable adult.
A more or less appropriate for that age. Manga, I never really read it, but I don't really recall that much and again, it doesn't seem to me anything different than what you see as Bulma on the very old Dragon Ball Z mangas. So I don't really see anything different. So there is either an axe to grind of a specific company that is whatever, or as you guys have been pointing out for the past couple of weeks, that when this thing comes up again, when Australia is deciding to ban something else again, that it's basically just votes axe to grind, and this is what they're seizing on. This very well could be just that. This is the thing that they decide. This is the cause celeb, and this is what we're going to use. And again, that's when I point out, if you really have to do that for anime, that you can do that with. But again, I'm when it comes to the spectrum of this particular topic of censorship of anything like this or music or anything like that, I'm pretty far on one side of it, which is I'm really suspect of it. I really don't like it. I think it's a slippery slope, and I think that I think what you guys have been saying in the past is right, which is I think this is just to get votes, because they're really going after an offensive anime, to be honest, and maybe they're doing that on purpose so that when they finally get the votes and they're reelected and they go back, they can just drop this like a hot potato. and then the business of it all can continue because
Yeah, but see, that's the problem. It's like
if you do go after the other ones, and you're really sincere about shutting this down, you're shutting down.
and that's the problem, Steve. It's like once you cross that bridge, it's like there
it's a slippery slope.
there is the sort of political. Well, there's the witch hunt.
Right.
It results in nothing. That's the political promise platform.
Right.
Question, ultimately is that coming up with what these, moral community standards are, which really, these subjective things versus objective things, which you famously, the judge in the pornography case is talking about. You don't know what porn is, but know it when you know it when you see it. But there's not really an objective standard for it as to what the reasonable adult finds offensive or inoffensive. And it's like the question ultimately for these bannings and stuff is like, how much are you able to drop this once the campaign's over? How much is this going to be, precedential, where now once it's done, that's it. You have to actually get your, whatever, the state of Victoria or the state of New South Wales, you have to get your legislative process to undo what you've done. And you know what I mean? This is one of those things where it's like, good night. You know how hard it is to undo that kind of stuff?
And that's my point. That's why I don't like this. This is one of those things where you just want to say, you know what? Let the parents decide. Let the parents be the issue decider on this. Don't make this political, because we went through some of you are not going to remember this, but we went through the 80s of people burning Blondie records, for Christ's sake. And, books like that. The
Iron Maiden.
The Iron Maiden. And actually, no, the Judas Priest court case where the parents said that they told their son that the song convinced their son to kill themselves, and it turned out to be like, was what's his name, just taking a breath in, and maybe it sounds like, I don't know, but I mean, it's just we went through at least 10 years of that, and then in the 90s we had Ice-T doing the Cop Killer album, and then we have the Gore effect, of rating CDs and stuff, and it's just never on. It's always ongoing. And the thing that I hate is when they actually make into law these designations. So when we're talking about the RC designations, that's the problem right there, is making that into law. That shouldn't be law. That should be just something as a guidance level. I mean, that's what it is for movies. For movies, there's the PG-13, the X ratings, and all that stuff. There's no law behind it. There's no authority behind it.
Really. That's the Motion Picture Academy doing their thing.
Right, exactly. And that's a self-regulating entity as opposed to the government. So that's something that so that's why I get really ticked off when I read about the Australian government doing something like this. And with an anime or a manga of no game, no life. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
But America does have obscenity laws.
Yes, they do, and they do have obscenity laws, but they're not codified. And by that I mean there's not a this is what this is, this is what this is, this is what this is, this is what it is.
Right.
It's very broad.
Right.
I mean, you have like very specific categories with regards to underage, minors, etc. But in the broader stroke of things, it's like, is somebody riding horseback naked, engaging in adult activity, is that obscene? You know what I mean? It's like there's so much subjectivity in some of the elements of the enforcement, where it's like, if you're not hurting the animal, you know what I mean, there's laws for that. But, it's a lot of this stuff is like subjective kind of application of a sort of broadly written statute. It makes it very difficult to know where you're going to move forward.
And keep in mind that we are talking about acts that are not even acts. We're talking about, particularly with the Australians, we're talking about something that is a print, a cell, something digital.
But that's illegal in the U.S. too.
Well, again, it depends on the actual classification of it. In other words, here in America, we can say, well, this book is the Kama Sutra. It's not, but
Kama Sutra. Wow, Steve, you had that at hand, didn't you? There.
Um, the Kama Sutra here is obscene. Well, is it obscene because in our laws we can say, well, is it obscene because of what the acts within, or is it obscene, or is it not obscene because it's something to help you with your sex life?
Mm-hmm.
There's that determination, but again,
Right.
even then, you're talking about something that's so subjective as opposed to what the Australians are trying to do, which is really pinpoint what it is. And when you start pinpointing stuff, you're going to have a real problem. There's one thing to
But
make regulation to be protective. It's another thing to make regulation to go after.
we already
That
have regulation that says that you cannot portray sexual activity with characters that appear to be under the age of 18 in the U.S.
right, because that's a protective law.
Right.
But that's a protective law. So there's that as opposed to, just saying because we have what we think is a scantily clad looking girl on the cover of a book, we're going to X that out.
But isn't
Or
that
is
isn't
the
that just the
literature?
application of the law, though? I'm confused.
Yes, it's application of the law of. I think I'm getting your question.
Yeah.
The application of the law is when you're talking about underage sex, it's about protection, and we have laws that are not concerned with obscenity laws. We're concerned with laws of protection. When you're talking about
child related laws versus
child what is
defined as adult or pornography.
That's it. Yes. So if you're looking at what you determine as child pornography, which is the act of, and particularly if there is an actual person involved, like we're talking about a video of a young child, a picture of a young child, or this is the actual child.
Okay.
That's a definitive problem. That is not good. We don't want that. Nobody wants that, except for the really odd people that do, and that's a problem. But when you're talking about something of a nature of no game, no life, or something that is more creative in that fashion, and the participants in it, if they're real, are of age. That's why they do that. Now, if you're talking about of a book where, like, for example, you're reading a book and it deals with the subject of a child being raped, is that pornography? Because if you say that it is, then you have to provide why. Why is it pornography as opposed to actually why is devolving or creating a story around an act like that in a novel? Why is that pornography? If you decide that it is pornography, as opposed to something where you purposely draw a person for the act of sexual titillation to be under 13 or to be like 13 years old or 12 years old, and this is the point of it. Do you see the distinction? And then what I feel that the Australians are moving in the direction of is, I think they're getting to that point where they're saying these are the examples of what we think is wrong. What we decide is it's the government deciding for you what does pornography mean. Here in America, we do have those laws that regulate, but there's a certain level of we're able to determine what that means for ourselves, and we rely on the protection laws of the people involved to act as the authoritative laws. That makes sense.
I guess I'm still not getting it. So to me, Australia has laws saying if you portray sexual activity with underage characters, not cool, you can be banned, right? And they are using those laws now on No Game, No Life and other things.
Right.
We have laws with the same restrictions. And so if are you arguing that we should not have those same laws? I guess that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
I see. I think this is where the disconnect where you and I are having. That I don't see Australia having the same laws as we do.
Okay.
I see Australia as having stricter laws that don't need to exist.
So how do you see the laws being stricter? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Because I think they're actually defining what it is as the government defining what pornography is. And if you're stating pornography as something, when you look at something, you go, is that really pornography? And that's the age-old question. And even here in America, we still have that argument: is this pornography? And while there are some guidelines that we have, it tells us, okay, also protection like for underage kids and things like that.
Right.
When does a piece of literature become obscene?
Mm-hmm.
And when is it an actual work of literature, even though it might have this uncomfortable moment in it?
So
is that actually we have? What I feel is that Australia has a similar right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is in that vein where they're still able to ask that question and to define for themselves as a people what is the actual pornography here. My fear is that for Australia, they're just going to say, this is pornography. This is pornography. This is pornography. That's not pornography. That's not pornography. What are you doing?
Well, it's certainly it's very interesting from their Well, it's very interesting from the perspective that they're having this discussion about something that we apparently don't have that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So if you want to talk about, the sun never sets on the British Empire. We all, share a common law heritage. And it's just interesting that the Australians are addressing this that doesn't seem to rise to the level of necessity in a similar English-speaking country.
Mm-hmm.
And
arguably,
I don't know. I haven't looked at it, but arguably there's not any information coming out of England in the same vein, or Canada.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that it's interesting that Australia finds that this is an issue that needs to be addressed when other members of the former Commonwealth kind of don't.
Well, yeah.
Why is this rise to that level for them?
Well, and there have been some. I know there was a case of a Canadian who imported some stuff a couple of years ago that was underage and got prosecuted under a law, and it was one of those broadly similar kind of things where it's like, well, I don't think this law applies. We do, back and forth, and well, it hasn't been.
But there hasn't seemed to be like this is a discussion generally about how Australia is handling this.
Right.
I'm not aware of, if that case being that case, you have child protection laws that to regulate that. But did Canada have that discussion as a society to say, this is protecting children, but we need to go more broadly across these different subject areas and address it as a different category for some reason? Because I'm not up on jurisprudence in Australia and how they do things and how their statutory structures go, but presumably, much like the rest of the world, you would hope have specifically child protective laws. So what is the necessity of this beyond the political scope for the long term, beyond this one politician's moment in the sun? What is the long term purpose of this? Because I'm not really aware that we've had No Game No Life as an anime, and I don't know how in depth the manga goes. We presumably have the manga here.
Well, that's the thing. We don't Amazon removed it.
Okay.
So
for the number of years, that it was available, Amazon, a private company, took the effort to do so. But was that at the behest? Did Congress say this has got to go?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There doesn't seem to be that didn't really seem to happen. Is this also arguably, and not to be crafty or stupid, there's plenty of anime that are out there where it's like, oh ho ho ho, here's a guy who's 10 years old and he looks like he's 25. Ha ha ha. He looks like an adult. Or here you've got somebody who's 4 foot tall and she looks like she's 10. Oh no, she's 23. Is this something in that where the creator could go back of No Game, No Life and be like, okay, fine. The brother is actually 40 and the sister is actually 27.
Mm-hmm.
They just look really young. That's, what I mean? Does
Yeah,
that solve it? Or what's the kernel of
well,
this?
and apparently, unfortunately, No Game Life is based on novels that like it establish that the younger sister is like 11, and like that's like a stated thing. But I also wonder if this isn't kind of related to. I think we talked about this on air a while back. That Japan for a long time had no child protective laws because they were under an umbrella of a broader law, and it was never seen as needed to have that. So I wonder if there isn't kind of a discussion in Australia around these laws, good or ill, around, here's how these laws are defined now. Maybe we need to change them. Maybe we're unhappy with them. And I suspect this is one of those unfortunate things where we know too much, in the sense that I think No Game, No Life, somebody showed them No Game, No Life, and they're like, oh my gosh. And they don't know that there's worse stuff out there. They have no clue
Right.
about all the other things out there. They're just like, well, this is clearly unacceptable, and it can't be any worse than this. Like, let me show you. No, let me not show you. No.
Legend of the Overfiend, anyone? Let's have a watching session. Hey.
Oh.
I mean, that's just always the interesting part when you launch on a moral crusade, is that Steve's saying the slippery slope. Whose morals? And I mean, it's great to speak in the general sense of what a society's morals are, but I mean, are those morals the middle class? Are they the upper class? Are they minorities? Are they, ethnic minority? Where is your moral basis for making a broad presumption?
So, pulling this back to anime, I wonder. Evangelion, when it came out, got a big backlash from parent-teacher unions for its scene involving Misato's apartment with clothes strewn everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And all of these PTA organizations, all these organizations suddenly called up. And I think it was Ano who said, here's the thing. I don't know a lot of mothers who watched Evangelion.
Right.
I think somebody organized the campaign and got a bunch of people, excited and organized a whole thing around this. So I think it's one of the missing pieces in this Australia story is who's driving this? Is it some, middle class organization who's like, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, but is this some, social organization who's like, this offends my values, this is the law, thus clearly it needs to go, boom, and the government's like, okay, or is it a politician saying, haha, I can get more votes through this thing, is it a vague thing, is it one specific, is it lobbying basically?
Yeah. It's the International League of Karens, and they want to speak to the manager.
Pretty much.
Oh no!
Right.
But I mean, and then that's what I'm getting at is like, where's the moral point of this? Because if you have, and I'm not picking on people named Karen, but the meme, the accepted Karen meme, do you have a group of Karens who they're just deeply offended at the idea of some cartoon? And damn it, something must be done. And it's like, okay.
and then when it happens, then you have then you realize how complex the issue actually is. I mean, how long have we been discussing this particular issue? Brent, no, seriously, and Brent and I going back and forth on this.
Yeah.
And at one point we're both speaking different languages to each other.
Yeah.
And and then you need a third person to come in and say, well, guys, this is what we think this might mean. Here's the actual question. But it gets people, just. And then what do these things mean? And what do they? How do they impact us? Where's the authority behind it? What is it? And I swear to God, if it's a Karen behind all this, I'm really going to be upset.
and Ginger Gaden's absolutely correct in the chat. Is that it's also complicated by the fact that what does underage look like? There are plenty of age people. I had a situation in a role playing game where I was playing. This is a few years ago, and one of those, maybe 10 years ago. And there was this cute girl playing with me. And she was playing in the game. She was really really good. She had colored hair and all this kind of stuff. And I was just really enjoying hanging out with her and started talking to her. And turns out she was 14 years old. And she just presented as much more mature than that. You're petite, but much more mature than that.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, these conversations are going to be different, and I wasn't gonna
Right.
hit her, I wasn't hitting on her or anything, but it's like, oh, gotcha, slotting you over here now.
Yeah.
And
Let me not make that saucy comment I was just about to make.
Exactly. And it gets really complicated. Plus, just the fact that anytime you have one culture's culture
Stories.
around
Right.
what is acceptable, Japan's very permissive with a lot of this stuff. Hitting another culture saying that, that's fine, this isn't. Yeah. And of course, Australia has much more accessibility, being closer.
Well, it's also that interesting question. Beyond those is from you're saying one culture versus another culture. You have a largely non-Christian culture,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and its intellectual property coming into contact with a largely Christian culture that has different sense of certain things that can be glaring in some circumstances. I mean, where again, if you had the manga and you just put the title page and said, brother is 40, sister is 27, please don't be concerned, and then let people read it. It's like that facing page of it would solve everything. But it's like if you made that clear as a warning at the start, it'd be like, would this be an issue?
Well, then you also have the problem that there are people who absolutely mess with that, and do stories where they are not that, but they change the number, and so it's all okay now, right? Like we can do that to these people. It's fine. It's like
they're not brother and sister; they're step brother and sister. It's fine then.
Yeah.
Distant cousins. Oh no, that's too close.
We had a whole conversation about this last night, Steve and I. Oh boy, it gets interesting. But
all I can think of is the Simpsons, Jebediah Springfield and Shelbyville, Manhattan, and their idea of moving out to found Springfield, and Jebediah Springfield, he's saying that it's to find freedom and to enjoy delicious, flavorless root marm. And Shelbyville, Manhattan goes, it's not to marry our attractive cousins. And then they split to Shelbyville and Springfield. So there we go.
There we go.
Your discussion, I'm only envisioning that right there.
Okay.
Who gets to be Homer? Who gets to be Springfield? Who gets to be Shelbyville? Who or Steve? Who's going to choose?
So let's move on to something rather happier.
The news
story-wise, if my stuff would cooperate with me, which it does not want to. This week, the Association of Japanese Animation is helping out those new in the animation industry or those hoping to join it someday. On Wednesday, they released a free 52-page manual that comprehensively covers the role of animation production assistant, an entry-level job that can lead to many other roles in the industry. Production assistants take the role of project managers, coordinating work on production and maintaining communications. The PDF manual is based on data from Studio Trigger producer Kazuyo Matsumoto's self-published guide to animation production assistants. The AGA's Development of Human Resources Committee also researched the industry standards relevant to the role. A number of other anime studios also assisted in the creation of the manual, including A1 Pictures, Sunrise, Studio 4C, and Nippon Animation. It's really cool seeing stuff like this come out that is just purely helpful to people.
The fact it's 52 pages.
Yeah.
Well, for me, that as I was reading it and listening to you, I was like thinking, day one, here's a mop, and you know, your production assistant job. I can tell that being an assistant or being a PA for a theater, it literally is the grunt work. It
Mm,
really is the bottom level. You know, you're the gopher. Here's the coffee. Yeah, you're going to sweep the stage every night after every
mm,
performance. You're going to do whatever the director wants to do. You're going to do whatever the stage manager wants
mm,
you to do, and it's just total grunt work. I mean, you're talking, you show up early and you leave late
mm.
and you don't get paid well, but these are things that you do to move forward. So I'm kind of curious to see this
No,
document
that's the
because
thing.
that sounds interesting, actually.
If you've seen Shirobako, the
Right.
the main character from that is her job. So that will give you an idea what that is. I'm actually just pulling it up now. Of course, it's all in Japanese, um,
Yeah.
which I can read not at all.
I was gonna say, translate it for us, Brent.
Yeah,
Come on.
and so it looks like, yeah, this is nice. It is going into elements around like storyboards, how those are laid out, timing sheets, um, the cell sheets. Oh wow, there's a whole schedule laid out. That's nice, like a Gantt chart, basically, showing you what that is.
What I wonder if they present this to like people who show up. They're like, "I'm gonna do this. This is gonna be a thing. I've always dreamed of this all the way through high school." And then they say, "Here's 52 pages. Read it, and then come back if you're still interested.
Yeah.
If
Here's
you're
the
not,
weeding
it was
out
nice seeing you."
document.
Yeah,
Here's the
exactly.
weeding out document.
Pretty much.
Exactly. So once you learn that, you're like,
Mhm.
"Oh no."
Well, and this is
Oh,
the
yeah,
thing, is that the production assistant basically gets assigned, of course, depending on studio and so forth, to make sure this episode gets done. You are PA on episode 3, and the shots have to get assigned to animators. They all have to get them done on time, and you got to make sure that all of these shots get done in 3 weeks. Go, have fun. And so
Make
you're
it
doing
happen,
that.
people.
Yep.
Chop chop.
And you're scheduling things, and obviously, as you 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 learn over time and you're given more responsibility, but still
right.
it's a big deal, and that's one of the things I think is so interesting, is that this is the kind of job that is not that is technical, in the sense that there's a lot of keeping track of things and so forth, compared to like the director's job, producer's job, things like
Right.
that, which is a little more flexible. So I think it's a great choice of something to make a document out of, to say, okay, here are your tools of the trade. Here's how you have to be organized, all that kind of stuff. Where other roles are just kind of like, figure it out.
Can you
Tell a good story.
imagine the day planner for an anime production assistant?
Gosh.
That thing must be hard, and it must be like this thick.
Mm-hmm.
It only goes 1 week.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Huh?
isn't that why you have your little personal digital assistant? That
Yeah, right.
just because
Well, it's
the amount
why
of paper that you would need just to track all that crap would be amazing.
it's why they have these giant whiteboards with all the shots on them, all laid out, and you color them in.
Yeah.
And you got to lay all that stuff out. It is nuts. And then of course, making sure it gets done.
Yeah, that's just
Oh yeah, I'll get to it.
well, like Shirobako and Animation Runner. Who the
Kuromi.
hell was Animation Runner?
Animation Runner Kuromi.
Kuromi.
Animation.
Just that idea of like physically being okay. This is the thing that has to get done. Are you done with the key features? No. Open up, hurry, open the door, get it done. I need this stuff now. We're on a schedule. And it's like, oh boy, yeah, no.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Again, 52 pages of weeding people out. That's going to be good. It'll be interesting
Right.
whether that will mean there'll be like a shortage of people trying to be production assistants. Whether it be like all of a sudden we've got 50,000 people that have no idea what this job is, and we hire 10,000 of them because they actually got some talent, down to like 200 people now. That you're like,
Yep.
whoops.
Well, and
Effective.
note in Shirobako the turnover in production assistants.
Yeah.
Like that is a thing that happens over the course of that show. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a hint. But that's not the only production related thing that we have to talk about, which is kind of cool. See if this works now. Yay! In recent times, we've seen an increase in new technology that seeks to lighten or augment traditional anime and manga production. This week brings a machine learning framework that's designed to create high-quality anime backgrounds from real photographs. Developed by a Chinese research team from Wuhan University and Hubei University of Technology, the program is called Anime GAN, a novel lightweight GAN for photo animation. It makes use of generative adversarial networks, or GANs, and neural style transfer to achieve fast and high-quality results with a light framework. The goal is to help artists save time in creating lines, textures, colors, and shadows. So basically getting a head start. As demonstrated by the example of pictures, it can be used to emulate existing styles, pictured in the same photo rendered in Hayao Miyazaki style, Paprika style, and Makoto Shinkai style. And so we'll have to see some actual examples of these. It'll be interesting to see how close it got. The authors of the study that the framework stems from submitted their papers to the International Symposium on Intelligence, Computation, and Applications 2019 and became available to online academic literature hub Springer Link on May 26th. A GitHub user by the name of Tachibana Yoshino implemented the open source code using TensorFlow. So it is now available for anyone to download and create their own anime-style images. I don't know about you all. I'm going to do that right after the news.
That's actually, I love the idea of that.
Mhm.
One of the things that as you were reading it, the image I got when I originally bought my first copy of Grave of the Fireflies DVD. One of the things that the bonuses was the actual pictures of the backgrounds of the where they were living towards the end in the the cave, the rocks, the forest around it. Can you imagine actually having that picture and then doing that rendering, then putting that into the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine that? That would just be amazing. That would be really, really amazing. I like the idea of it.
I'm on their GitHub, and what I love is that he has actually taken screen caps from a behind the scenes on a Makoto Shinkai film, and they have photos of where they went, and then he shows it in all the different things, including a photo of Makoto Shinkai. So you're going to see Makoto Shinkai in Makoto Shinkai style.
Nice.
Which is kind of funny, but yeah, and it's funny because looking at it, it's basically a set of filters, right? In the sense that it doesn't have that painterly style,
right,
directly that you get out of that, but it does make it look a lot more anime, for lack of a better term. It's really, really interesting. Yeah,
I know years ago when I worked at the zoo, the photographer we had that would come up, he had some program where he could take a photo of something and it would render it in watercolor, or it would render it in oil painting, or it would render it in charcoal, or it would, you know what I mean? The program would do the rendering of the image in that art style that you wanted. So I'm wondering that, and that was 14 years ago.
Oh yeah, Photoshop's had those filters for a while. Yeah,
it's so I would imagine this must be, this many years later must be really damn amazing.
That's really cool.
Think about the implication on the budget of an anime, and just think about how much more money will be freed up to go into other things, other types, of the process. If you can do that with the backgrounds, if you can simply make backgrounds by taking a decent photographer, take decent pictures, and then bring it back, then that's something you don't have to worry about. I mean, it took in Ghost in a Shell, it took them a year to do that 140-second scene. And with all the CGI and the drawn into it, imagine if those actual places existed and you were able to take the pictures of that. That's a budget number you don't have to worry about.
Yeah. What was the background studio that just went bankrupt? Studio Florida? No, something
I don't remember the name, but yeah.
But you know what I mean? That's the good news is that, since they did so many backgrounds and now they're bankrupt and out of business, you've got something to replace that. The bad news is the next studio who does backgrounds that was going to take the work load from that studio that went bankrupt now itself will go bankrupt because now the program will do it for them. Like, oh,
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, looking at the thing, it looks like really what you're getting out of it is, again, like I said, of Photoshop filters. You're getting the visual style without the brushstrokes to make it look like anime. So I think the advantage it's going to have is, obviously there'll be anime that just say, do this thing, apply a filter, done. But for a lot of studios, I think it'll be great just to be able to say, we've established our artistic tone. Take all your photos, run it through this, and then here is your exact visual reference for your backgrounds. So when you paint your backgrounds, use this color scheme, use this, make it look like this. It just has to look painted. We'll see. But technology is definitely racing ahead, as should surprise absolutely no one.
is it Tier Studio?
Could be. I do not remember. I'll be honest. That has gone right out of the head.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm looking at the news stuff, the dark side of the
Mm.
Japanese animation industry, and
Mm.
Variety, an actual
Okay.
article from Variety that talked about Tier Studio.
Could
Right.
could be. Moving on to other happy news. Remember several months back when the staff and musicians of Cowboy Bebop came together to create a special performance for charity? The same thing's happening again this week, at this time with the cast and staff from My Hero Academia. May's charity rendition of The Real Folk Blues was arranged by Tencent audio coordinator Mason Lieberman, who's doing the same thing again with My Hero Academia BGM tracks Might Plus You and You Say Run. More than 80, that's 80 artists participated in creating the new track, including 22 members of the original English dub cast and original soundtrack composer Yuki Hayashi. The track was released on YouTube and music streaming services and is also getting a limited vinyl release because 2020. The vinyl version can only be obtained by people who back the project on vinyl music crowdfunding website Curates with a Q, with all proceeds going to the United Nations Children's Fund, aka UNICEF. Game and anime composer James Landino has also produced a tech-core remix of You Say Run, which is exclusive for purchase. Now,
Wow.
I haven't
Oh.
like I have a passing exposure to My Hero Academia. I've not watched the whole thing. Is the soundtrack like, epic?
I don't think it's so much the soundtrack is epic. I just think that My Hero Academia is so that's like when people say anime, it's My Hero Academia. Well,
Yep.
how about no My Hero Academia? I think this is gonna raise some serious money. I don't think it has to do with the quality of what the song is at, because I actually don't remember the opening opening song at all. But that doesn't mean anything, because if it's this popular with an anime this popular, I think people who are really into it are going to be like, I want that vinyl. Do you have a record player that can play that? I can't. I want that vinyl. And so really, I think it's not knowing that much about I've watched a few episodes, not knowing that much about the anime, but knowing how powerfully popular it is, I can't imagine this isn't going to raise money, and I think that's just freaking awesome. I think that's just it's great.
And they could release this thing on 8-track and people will still buy it because they love the series.
Yeah.
Nobody has an 8-track player. They'll still buy it.
I wonder if you can still produce 8-track. I wonder if there's still like companies out there that have equipment for duplicating 8-track. That'd be funny.
I bet you there's money. I mean, I bet you there's a way.
There's a way.
I think my parents have an 8-track somewhere. I should see if I can find that.
If you can build a giant robot for $1 million, I think you could probably find a way with enough money to make an 8-track.
Fair point.
You're like, there you go.
We live in interesting times. Speaking of, finally, summer in Japan is typically the season for tests of courage and spooky outings, just as the fall is for us in the U.S. If you find yourself hankering for the haunted house experience but are unable to leave the house, Tokyo-based haunted house Obaken might be starting just the program for you. Beginning in August, Obaken will be offering online horror experiences through video chat services like Skype, Zoom, and Vimeo. These services take the form of interactive stories where participants can communicate with actors as the tale progresses. The headline act is Monago Will Something Happen? A mysterious ghost painting introduced by an occult otaku program. And there's good news for those of us outside Japan. This program is set to get an international version in September. The story stars occult fanatic Satoshi Asakura, who opens the video call with a lecture about a ghost painting he procured from a flea market. However, both the host and guests are confronted with strange sights midway through the call. The experience will be hosted on Airbnb, which is an interesting marketing move. I'm not sure seeing ghosts appearing in the property be a great motivator to go stay there, but hey, maybe it'll work. Each showing will allow up to 8 guests and cost 1,800 yen, or about $17. The program also offers a second experience that accommodates up to 10 guests called The Fool's Offense, where participants are responsible for guiding the actor to safety as they watch his story play out on screen, which is a really interesting premise.
It's going to lead the actor's death. That's the way it's going to go.
Every time.
Somebody's going to
Pretty
troll
much.
it, and they're going to end up like what was the AI thing that Google launched, and so many people went in and fiddled with it that it ended up making it like this horrible, like terrible racist program.
Like the Microsoft chatbot? I think that was the one.
It was something. It was something.
Yeah.
It was like where they just skewed its experience index to a point where it just starts being horrible.
But that was funny because they launched that in multiple regions. The US one was horrible. The Japanese one just talked about like the weather and Hello Kitty.
That might actually be really nice. Like, that's all it talks about. The weather and Hello Kitty.
You know,
I could get on board with that.
Yeah. Nobody said anything. It's just all inoffensive stuff. It was kind of hilarious.
I am all in on this one, just like the sumo drumming thing. I am all in. I am the guy who goes to Disney to go to the haunted house. That's my favorite, one of my favorite rides of all time. I love that ride. I can't get enough of it.
Haunted Mansion, baby.
Ooh, yeah. Oh my god, I love that. It's so ancient and archaic, but I can't. I just love it. And this just speaks to me. I mean, just having like just being able, and the fact that I can actually do this in September is going to be like, I'm like, take my money, please. You know? Take my money.
I would like to crash in on the Japanese version of itself, just to see how it kind of looks.
Works.
Just to know that when it launches in September, that we could participate in that. See how much it changes for an international market versus the Japanese market.
Yeah. It's interesting because Japanese horror is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
You
say Junji Ito?
Yeah. So yeah, and I do love the idea that these that you're basically working through a story. It's role playing, really. And you've got this concept that you got this this ghost hunter who's all excited about ghosts, and he bought this painting, and wait, is that moving? What's going on?
Night gallery.
Yeah, there we go. I think it's really cool. I've always found it interesting that idea in Japan that you get scared in the summer to cool down. That you go to all of the theme parks will have their haunted house stuff in like July and August, and that's
unbearably hot and humid as hell, and you put people in costumes. Oh, that's great. Nothing like a nylon bag to sit yourself in and stew. Delicious.
But I guess when you don't have Halloween, right? That's not a thing in Japan, so do it whenever you want. Why not?
Well, see, Kira is launching the Halloween initiative in Japan.
Oh,
so
nice.
She's working hard on that as we speak. She's going to be the representative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We figure if they've got Valentine's Day and White Day,
true.
then
White
why
Day.
couldn't
Absolutely.
you? You know what I mean? Halloween. I think. Talking with my stepfather's niece, and how in Australia nobody 20 years ago had Halloween. It just really wasn't kind of a thing. But the prevalence of cable in most Australian households and American media pressure at things like the Simpsons Halloween special gained traction, and people got more interested in Halloween, and more kind of Halloween-y things started happening. And then now they have like full-on almost American Halloween. And it's
Wow.
like, oh,
Well,
there you go.
I know Harajuku has done Halloween themed costume walks, right, and stuff like that every year, where they're like, this is this is sort of costume day, International Costume Day, Halloween.
Yeah.
So everyone's gonna get decked out and just walk up and down the street and so forth. And I think like for quite a few years, the like the proprietors would hand out candy or whatever. So yeah,
Here's a mochi for you. Here's a mochi for you.
Well,
So, yeah.
it would be interesting to see what the translation would be for the Japanese to actually have this as a major holiday thing. People are going to go out and do that because they have such interesting twists on holidays like Valentine's Day. Not only do you have Valentine's Day, but the other person gets chocolate too on White Day. So that's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
And my favorite though interpretation of holiday traditions in Japan is KFC for Christmas.
Yeah.
I love the idea of that.
Nothing says Christmas like KFC.
But it's a thing. It's what
Absolutely.
they do. You have to pre-order meals for Christmas.
Wow.
Kentucky Fried Christmas.
Kentucky Fried Chicken, presented by the Colonel. But so how would I would just be very curious to see Halloween and the fact that Japanese horror is so different.
Yeah.
What that would look like.
And I mean, how many yokai do you have to call on, right, to begin with?
Yeah.
7-8 million.
So you got that to begin with.
Those are the ones that are cataloged, actually.
Right. Yeah. I wonder what they give out.
That makes Halloween so. Halloween would be so broad. It's like, you don't just have witches and goblins and, like monsters. Things. You have like an entirely huge cultural landscape of Oni and yokai and all kinds of crazy ass monsters. That's like, wow, cool.
Yeah, I wonder what you'd give out, because Japan doesn't really have a. I'm trying to think of a lot
senbei.
I mean, there aren't a lot of like wrapped individual candies in Japan that I can think of. What's senbei?
Crackers, rice crackers.
Oh,
senbei.
right. Yeah, that's true. You're
individually
right.
wrapped senbei.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nope. That's what it would be. Totally.
That's super easy. They come and I've got some in the cupboard downstairs where it's 2 little senbei crackers, salt on one side, sugar on the other, 2 little crackers per package, nicely, cleanly, hygienically packaged. Boop, there you go.
Yep. That'd be very interesting to see if we.
Or fugu. Oh, I'd take fugu. But downtown somewhere to a really expensive restaurant, I'd be like, "Hi, trick or treat, fugu, free fugu, please, in the bag."
Wait 45 minutes, and we'll be out with your fugu.
I want one done by the master chef. I don't want the practice blowfish because this will be my last Halloween.
Yeah. Well, you think this is a country with traditionally very safe streets. If any country is going to have kids running around in costumes, getting treats, you think it would be Japan. Totally.
And with the added pressure that if you kids misbehave, we're going to report it to your school.
True.
And then your school's going to call your parents. Yeah. You're not going to have Hell Night the same kind of way in Japan.
Yeah. Pranks involve just, mispronouncing a word slightly. Like, that's as far as it goes. Nothing crazier than that. It's hilarious. Cool. All right. That is the news. Which took us a little longer than usual, but we had important things to talk about.
A little longer. It took us like an hour longer than usual.
Yeah. Just a little bit.
Hey, deep discussion requires time.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. Then that's the thing, is that sometimes, that is how that works. Now, it is August.
Yes, it is.
Anime history. Thankfully, last week on Anime History, we covered the heavy stuff. So this week, we get to be a little lighter on the anime history. So I don't know if I'm even going to do this. I'm not going to do this as a segment, I don't think, because it's not really anime related, but I want to talk to you guys about it.
The look on my face is like I'm just. If it's lighter than Barefoot Gen and Grave of the Fireflies, it's like, oh, that could be anything.
Yeah, literally, it's literally anything.
Like,
yeah. So these are not particularly anime related, but they're more Japanese history related. So August 14th, 1945 is VJ Day, the Victory over Japan Day. This is technically the day it was announced in the U.S. The 15th was the surrender of Japan because the international date line and complexities and all that kind of fun stuff. But this is a day when it was officially announced. And this was also thus the day of the Jewel Voice broadcast. So for those not familiar, this was when the Emperor Hirohito came on the radio and announced to the populace that Japan was surrendering, including the immortal line, "The war situation has developed in a direction not necessarily to our advantage." Understatement of all time. And what's interesting to me about the Jewel Voice, well, many things is interesting about the Jewel Voice broadcast.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. Partly the fact, partly the fact that this was the first time the vast majority of people had ever even heard the Emperor, and this is radio. So if you heard about this thing and then turn your ear to it, you don't necessarily know who's talking. So that kind of complicated things. Also, and I didn't know this, he was using a sort of an archaic form of Japanese speech on 1940s radio. So apparently there was a lot of awkwardness around, what's he saying? Yeah. Are we surrendering? And everyone was obviously very serious, but then there's also kind of this, I'm not quite sure what's happening, which is one of the reasons why it was a very odd, traumatic moment, because everyone kind of had to process and understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And the fact that Japanese leadership up until that point had been saying, no, to the last man, we're going to defend to the last man, woman, and child, we're going to fight them off. And the Emperor comes off and goes, no. Nope, we're done. It's over. But then it is couched in this fascinating language of being very clear. Thanks to the Americans kind of looking over the shoulder to say, we're done. But also saying, like, we're gonna move past this. We're gonna go forward. You have that famous line, we must bear the unbearable. Knowing how difficult much of a 180 this was, but also just having a wonderful sort of view towards the future in it, of saying, we'll get through this. We'll get past it. We'll move on.
And to think that he was actually going to try and kill himself after he made the record, because the record was pressed and was disseminated out through the country, and there was, and the history behind that is just amazing, because hardliners really did take it up to the last second. They really did.
Yep.
They really did take it up to the last second, to the point where they were willing to send out guards to prevent the Emperor from doing to go into the studio. And there was, just like you would imagine, there was discord within the government. I mean, it's just collapsing, right? And so the Emperor does this, and it is a beautiful broadcast, even though it's so ultimately sad for them. It is very important, and like you said, you listen to it, and it's very understated, and it's like you listen to it, and you're just like going, he's so calm, and he's just like talking, okay, so we lost the war, and it's 80 degrees outside. Look at the cherry.
It's not exactly like an impassioned, emotion-filled speech.
Right. Yeah. And people really did. There are pictures of people like looking at the loudspeaker in their village where they would, radio broadcasts from, and just staring at wonder, because you're right. Nobody had heard his voice. He's not somebody that's regularly photographed or have a movie reel made of them. And so, this is a thing. They introduce them, and they're just like, and quite a few people drop to their knees,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily in worship, but just because this person is supposed to be of divinity.
Yeah.
So they just, take
Oh,
it.
I have
And
a photo that I came across, and they're bowing to the broadcast, because you want to show respect, like it's a perfectly reasonable response.
And
it's
you
crazy.
you don't necessarily know, like in a lot of authoritarian societies, you don't know if the Kempeitai are watching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You don't
That's
know
right.
who's an informant. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
not showing proper deference to an imperial broadcast,
Mm-hmm.
it just because the war ended and
Right.
the American forces are at sea doesn't mean that you can't have the Kempeitai kill you where you stand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's still grudges going on,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah, it's the entire story behind that broadcast
Mm-hmm.
is just amazing. How it almost didn't happen, and
Mm-hmm.
how the hardliners almost got their wish to die.
Mm-hmm.
What's the name of the title? Onwards to Our Glorious Deaths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yoromizuki
Mm-hmm.
National
manga.
suicide. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and that craziness, and
Yeah.
it's just you know, be thankful for the little things like that we didn't have to do. We
Oh
didn't have to go.
man, yeah.
That would have been not a national tragedy. That would have been a worldwide tragedy
Yeah.
for everybody if we had to fight that battle.
Well, and what's also remarkable is that Hirohito had been a figurehead. He had basically just let everything happen,
Right.
and he was very much. I mean, he'd spent his entire life as a figurehead. Like there was nothing for him to do, and that had been the case for millennia, over millennia in,
Mhm.
in Japan, really. And the fact that he basically said no, like he literally just stood up to them and said, yeah, I know you believe that is the right thing to do, but no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to go and do this thing.
Yeah.
It's gone on too long. Amazing times. Yeah. And then the long road to recovery, which fortunately happened.
Yes.
But
And gave us anime.
and it gave us anime,
And gave us anime.
gave the U.S. cherry blossoms. It's all good, Yeah, there's beautiful cherry blossoms all over the place. It's lovely. Does anyone want to hear about an anime I love?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Because I do have this kind of queued up, and I did want to
And
talk
it better
a little
not
bit
be the Legend of the Overfiend.
It
Well,
is
no,
not.
it could be the Legend of the Overfiend. That's totally up to you. I mean,
Not
I'm
quite.
not judging.
Not quite.
Whatever's your jam, man.
So let me pull that up and do that. Switch that over. There we go. All right. So I'm going to talk for a little bit about an anime that I love. And I'll be honest, there are times when I'm not sure why I love this anime as much as I do. K-On! Came out at a very particular time in anime fandom. Kyoto Animation was riding high on the success of shows like Haruhi Suzumiya and Lucky Star. And K-On! Came out and was clearly a very silly show about some very silly characters. And I started watching it, and I just fell in love with these characters. Just all of them, just the whole scenario, the whole situation. I loved how understated it was. As silly as K-On! Can be, the fact that it's just this sort of regular, everyday school life anime series, and the fact that it doesn't take itself too seriously. The fact that these characters, it doesn't try to be a really serious musical show, but it is a show about being in this music club. And I just love the fact that it is about getting together with friends and hanging out and being a part of something, even when you're not doing the thing you're supposed to be doing, because they never really get anywhere in K-On!, which is one of the fun things. But I just love the vivaciousness of this, the brightness of this, how fun it is, how upbeat the show is. Beat. And the fact that it is just a fun ride all the way through, that you're just, you're just enjoying spending time with the characters. I think it's one of the reasons why K-On! Why a lot of people bounce off K-On! Because it is a very specific experience. It's not an action series. It doesn't have this big driving plot all the way through. It's not psychologically complicated. It is this celebration of hanging out and of youth and of just enjoying being together with friends and doing things, while still being thoughtful about it. Kyoto Animation knows how to be thoughtful about things, and also how to be silly at times. One of the things that folks don't quite notice is that in K-On! You have that little gling from every episode, and every episode it gets a little better. There's slight improvement because she's practicing, and it's just one of those little things that if you hear that from the final episode versus the first episode, there's progression over there because they're thinking about these things. And that's just one of the fun things. It is very cute. It is often very silly, but it is just fun. It is fun kind of personified in its own unique way. And it's impressive seeing a series that has no mystery. There's no sci-fi invasion. There's no fantasy elements. None of that. It is relentlessly set in the real world with real characters. Well, fairly real characters. It is anime after all. But that it does so in a way that is just so charming, and that is a it is a way of spending time that in a lot of other shows would feel like it's a time waster. Like you're just sort of churning through minutes because it's a fun show. But this really does feel like it has not weight, but it has charm. It has experience. It brings you along with it and with these characters, and you're glad you spent the time with it. It wasn't just something to fill time. You end it with some emotions and with some feelings there. Just like hanging out with friends, right? It's a very particular thing, but I think it works very well for what it is, and so I love it. I love it. Love it. I don't know. I love K-On! K-On's fun. But yeah. He is odd. He is very odd.
Yeah.
I'm about to watch that on your recommendation, Brent.
Okay, so
I'm still watching it.
Once you have both finished it, that is absolutely going to be an analysis night. We are definitely going to sit down and talk about Key the Metal Idol. Okay. Because there's a lot to unpack about Key. And I feel bad that Key is as obscure as it is. I think it's an interesting show. It has flaws. But yeah, it's an interesting show.
I think it is certainly not something I would just necessarily off the cuff, like going from K-On! To Key. You know what I mean? So if somebody's like, I just love K-On! And be like, oh, you should watch Key.
No.
Yeah.
That's
not necessarily. Not necessarily. Yeah, it's a very specific thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, like one of the things that I got into anime for was for unusual, complex, strange things. Like I like that kind of stuff, and Key is definitely all of those things. But yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Konosuba.
It is not Konosuba.
It's talking about Slayer's Bubblegum Crisis. Not Konosuba.
Yeah. It's actually,
and
Bubblegum Crisis is similar ballpark in some ways.
Okay. K-On! Still remains Zombieland Saga. If you're talking about sort of idolish kind of things, I was okay with Zombieland Saga. It didn't really do anything for me. I've not watched any of the Idolmaster series.
Okay.
Again, Lapis, Redive. No, whatever the heck it is. Lapis something. it's got K-On! Elements to it.
Mm.
But K-On! Got me to watch Love Live School Sunshine.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Love Live, Idol, School Sunshine, whatever.
Mhm.
That's as far as those two. I adore those shows.
Mm.
And I have not since enjoyed an idly kind of singy kind of show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is about those two. It just is so endearing about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think certainly Love Live, it's the choreography of it, and I liked actually the use of the CGI
Mm-hmm.
in making the dancing portions of it. I really found that visually quite appealing, and the songs were really peppy.
Mm.
K-On!, it's just like there's no real way to experience K-On! Without just loving the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, there's not like a dance and song thing where you're just like, you can kind of snap your fingers to it. It's just there's such lovely progression and growth. That's just, I'd hate to say wholesome,
Yeah.
but
No. Yeah.
it really is. I mean, there's not any kind of like subtext of romance or, anger or super hatred of this person or something like that, vengeance kind of thing. It's just fun people doing stuff, learning things. And it's like, oh, it's just so nice.
The only things that I know, I mean, I've of course know what K-On! Is, and I've seen it around for years. I've never actually watched an episode.
Mm.
All I know about K-On! I have from AMVs.
Okay.
Because there was a point where it was just
Oh yeah.
in every single AMV ever.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been intrigued. I've never had the time to watch it. I've never actually watched it, but nobody I have yet to hear anybody say anything really negative about it. Anything like, don't watch this, don't waste your time, or anything like that. It's it's on my bucket list to watch, but I just haven't gone to see it yet. But like I said, I've seen it through all the AMVs, and I actually, because I enjoy making AMVs, not knowing the anime at all, I found a GIF of it. One of the characters just eating a corn on the cob, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's just and she looks kind of manic while she's doing it. And so I put it on an endless GIF loop.
Nice.
And there's this song that I wish I could play it but YouTube is going to be like, and because of the song, it's the Nom 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 song, and it's literally just nom 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 nom, and it goes on in that vein. So I said, okay, see if anybody watches this for 10 minutes, and I made it 10 minutes. And I was just like, can you watch it? There's a payoff at the end. There was a payoff at the end, but I had to go through 10 minutes of that. But K-On! is one of those anime where it's managed to seep into all levels, whether it's AMV, the anime, or going to you can't go anywhere and not recognize it,
right?
Because of it's a popularity thing, or it's just that people just love it so much.
Yeah. And
it's just amazing to me that I'm aware that I'm one of the few people in the world that's actually never even seen an episode. But it's just one of those things where I'm just like, if someone brings up K-On! Or something like that, I feel like just by virtually just what I know and seeing, which is so much of it already out of context, I'm like, I think I kind of get it a little bit. So it's just interesting. It's an interesting anime to me because it isn't a mecha. It isn't superhero. It isn't, and that's the vibe that you get. That this isn't anything. There's no relationship. It's just these girls. To me, what I see is girls trying to make a band.
Mm-hmm. Kind of, sort of.
That's
when they bother.
That's what I see. Yeah, but obviously there's more to it than that. But it's just one of those things where I just kind of look at it and I just go, wow, this is like not anything. It's not powering up for 5 episodes of Dragon Ball Z. I mean, it's just kind of nice, refreshing.
It's the Seinfeld of anime, right?
Okay.
Right. Like it's fun. It's entertaining. It's not particularly complicated. It's not but there's a particular style to it. There's a particular take to it. I remember when not long after it came out, we were talking about it on the channel, and somebody said, I watched the first episode of K-On! And I'm not sure if I like it. And my response was, if you've seen the first episode of K-On!, you know what to expect. Like, there's no dramatic turn. There's no massive change in style. Like, that is what it is. So, you can judge it very effectively right now. It's totally fine.
They don't all suddenly learn magic and the world's invaded by aliens.
Yes, exactly.
You're getting exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I remember, and the other interesting thing about K-On! I think is when it came out, it was on the heels of, again, Haruhi and Lucky Star, which were very otaku focused. They were and it was a kind of a sci-fi show, and then sort of a, slice of life, school life, teenagers hanging around, but more sort of snarky. And folks were like, what are they going to do next? Like, Kyoto Animation's on a rise. What are they going to do to sort of knock our socks off? And they do K-On! And everyone's like, this is really charming. It's not what I expected at all. It's just lovely. Okay, cool. And TC, you're absolutely right about Lucky Star. The coronet, the infamous coronet sequence is something that a lot of folks bounce off of. And I think once you realize, there are things in this that are just very specific Japanese references that I'm not going to get unless I grew up watching Japanese television. Case in point, Timote. Which I remember seeing that and thinking, I don't get it, but there must be something. And then somebody linked through to like a YouTube link of one of the commercials, and I just burst out laughing. I was like, that is hilarious! I get it! Okay, yes.
I'm on the in crowd. I know.
I love when Aya Hirano came over. I think this was New York Anime Festival. Someone asked her to do any line from Lucky Star. And she went, okay. Timote. And everyone, Oh, dear. Cool. Well, I do, after all of that, must admit, I do have a question. What did we learn on the show tonight, Brent? Exactly. What did we learn tonight after all of that news and all of that history? Gosh, I'm trying to think.
Oh, I can think of the discussion part that went very, very long. And the fact that there's so much subjective elements to the things that we discussed, and that finding the absolute bright line for what should be banned and what should not be banned, and there are complex issues involved both politically, socially, morally, etc.
Law is hard.
Yes, it is.
Law is indeed hard.
Mm-hmm. Definitely learned that.
Is.
So I learned in an anime discussion, you shouldn't touch the political discussion with a 10-foot anime pole. Just let it alone.
Not necessarily.
It sucked an hour of our lives away talking about that.
But I think we learned a lot, and I will say, and I did learn a lot tonight about, and thank you, Steve. I learned a lot about that situation and the pluses and minuses thereof. That was a very interesting discussion.
I learned tonight that we can have an hour-long discussion on one particular topic. Should we ever do that again? I don't know.
Depends on the topic.
But no, like you were saying, Brad, and these are good topics to have, and especially when people are going from it from different angles and learning what people are seeing and just making up their own minds about it, and hopefully contributing positive like it was tonight. I felt it was a positive,
absolutely
conversation. But the most important thing I learned tonight, is that I learned how I'm going to die. I learned that I'm going to die in front of a video game, slapping on a hammer.
The taiko drummer.
The drummer. But I will not curse the world and dress as a sumo wrestler. It will be in normal clothes. It'll be normal clothes.
You don't want to get your Moashi on there? Come on. Be fun.
I learned that
I'd,
Crunchyroll.
I'd try it if I didn't get arrested.
Look, doing that would be like me singing to a small child. I'm just going to make the small child cry. Okay, so no reason to do that. No reason to do that.
Nice.
I learned that Crunchyroll is apparently quite valuable.
Yeah.
Very valuable.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Because that was interesting. I mean, I will just straight up say, like, it's one thing when folks said, "Oh, it's shopping around." Another when they say for $1.5 billion. Okay, that's a thing.
Maybe Amazon will buy it and it'll become part of the Amazon
Hey,
empire.
There we go. They could
Too
use some
late,
help
guys.
with
I'm
Prime Video.
already buying that. already buying
All right. What's the credit limit on my credit card?
do you take third-party out-of-state bad checks? I'll be glad to write you one for $1 billion. Ha-ha.
Is this in crayon?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Signature's a signature, my friend.
Yeah, would I lie to you?
Yeah. Does this look like the face of a lie? Well, never mind.
Yeah.
Does that look like the face of a liar?
No.
No, it's not. He's good for $1 billion, isn't he?
Definitely, no question.
No, he's not.
That's what we need to do. We take Crunchyroll and turn it into a dog and cat video service. Make our fortune.
Wait a minute, isn't that what YouTube is?
It's true, but it never makes money. So
Fun cat videos.
Hey.
Endless years of fun cat videos.
Why not? That's what the internet was made for, right?
Yeah. Apparently.
Whiskey and cats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. All right. I think that will do it for us for tonight. Thank you all so much for your talk and your conversation. Hope you all have a great rest of the week. Until next time,
everybody.
watch more anime.